Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 3 of the Zone ZLTAC Australasian Championships 2022 post-Nats review from Bendigo. My name is Bootza. Big welcome to our guest tonight. We have our co-founder of the Laser Sports Academy, Holmes. Welcome, Holmes.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And we have the captain of the Sunshine Coast Storm, Lauren Syrex Curry. How are you going tonight, Lauren?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. I was really excited when I found out you're going to be on. Many people would have seen you commentating on the stream at Nats over the last few years. We know how much you know about the game. You understand it inside out. So we're really excited to have you on to share some of what you saw from within the arena and also on the stream during the Nats this year. So let's get stuck straight into it. Tonight's the big one. We've got the big boys and the big girls and the big everybody else is in there tonight. We have 8-1 to analyse, which is really exciting. The top 8 teams coming in at 8th spot. Let's get stuck straight into it. We have our good friends 1UP. They finished Cascades in 11th. They were sync listed at 3rd. They moved up and down the ladder a bit throughout the week, which we'll talk about. The players on 1UP are and Mus, who only played a few games each, and also Gunner, Guinea, Dan, and Snake. So, what did we see from 1UP this week, guys? Lauren, what did you see from 1UP, and why do you think they finished around a little bit lower than what they were predicted based upon the syncs list?
Yeah, so we played 1UP a fair bit, I think. I think we played them every Cascade, and they did seem to evolve throughout the comp. When we played them in round robin, it felt a lot different when we played them in Cascade too. But they did kind of stick to, their 1UP sort of strategies. And I think we've all seen 1UP long enough around to sort of know how they play. So very aggressive, very dumpy, almost looks a bit disjointed in the maze, but I don't think it actually is disjointed. I think it's just hard to understand as an observer, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
To be fair, they did quite well in pre-nats 2 and 3, I believe. Did they win both of those? No.
They won pre-nats 1 and 2.
1 and 2, that was it. Yeah, so I think they may have come in with a false sense of security as to how well the dump was going to work, because I think we all thought that, didn't we? I came out of every pre-nats going, we better start practicing dumping, guys, because otherwise we're going to be in trouble. And then I think the meta really shifted away from that as we came through the comp, and they just couldn't adapt in time, if that makes sense. Their pack on pack was always great, and their ability to get bases was probably better than most, but we were just finding that if you had 2 teams in there who were very anti-dump meta, they did struggle.
Yeah, I did notice it appeared from the scoreboard anyway that they appeared to do their best to try and adjust for that shift away from the dumping. And the Cascade 2, they got 3 seconds by only 1,000 or 1,500 points. So they were kind of almost there. But because it's not their natural style, and because they were adjusting on the run, it might be fair to say they just couldn't quite get to that elite level that they're possibly able to get in the more aggressive styles of game.
And it's like we were saying with when we were talking about the Bendigo Blitz, we were talking a lot about just unfortunately how the Victoria scene has ended up post-COVID. They've probably suffered some of the most out of everyone around Australia. So yeah, I was talking to Guinea about what their trainings have been looking at, and he was like, yeah, well, when they even get the chance to train, they pretty much never have enough players to do team games, and it'll pretty much just be your base scraps or base run or whatever you want to call it, just at a base, trying to emulate base play. But like we were saying with the Bendigo Blitz, it's one of those things, the arena dust does start to pile up when you can't get in there with 15 players and play some real team games. So yeah, that could be also obviously a massive part of it.
Yeah, and if you look at their team list, is it identical or almost identical as 2015? It's got to be close. It's got to be.
I don't think Mus was on the team in 2015.
And they didn't have Snake in 2015 either.
Yeah,
I think
so
it was a 5-man team, because there was the whole thing of thumbs up Gunner.
That's right.
And then
they lost a player, and then they were down to 4.
Yeah. So yeah, it would have been Morrow, Gunnar, Guinea, Dan, and Lolance was the 2015
Yeah,
roster.
they've with the dip in the scene in Victoria, they've been less able to blood new players as well, bring new players in. So that whole roster is 7 years older than they were in 2015 as well. So those guys aren't getting any younger. So still to be competing in the top 10 is an amazing effort. But 3 wins, 3 seconds in finals, and eventually beaten by the ORCAS. So they didn't really take any of the big scalps that they needed to take in order to move up the ladder.
I think another good thing to note is I've always seen Morrow as like one of the strongest players on the team, and like just a massive like foundation to that team as well. Like wherever he is, he's having like an enormous impact. But you can see like for those not in the know, just by looking at the solo ladder, you can see he only played 2 games. He had like an accident happen before Nationals that basically meant that he couldn't play. So he played a couple games, maybe like, I'm not sure why he was playing the couple games, whether it was like he started feeling a bit better just to test the waters, or like they needed him to play for whatever reason. But one of their strongest players, or Morrow as everyone else calls him, just wasn't able to play due to an injury, and it happens. It seems 1UP's plagued with playing in Bendigo and injuries, so...
Yeah,
I do believe Lowlance was injured or ill for a day or two, and that's when Mus and stepped in. So they did have some other issues within the team.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that Mus only played 3 games, so they really kind of wanted to go with. How did they make that work? So I've got here. Did Mus play? He must have played more than 3 games. Surely the solo ladder said 3 when I saw.
No, Mus didn't play much at all.
Yeah, he only played 3. So the main 5 was Gunnar, Guinea, Dan, Snake, and No Lance, who all played between 22 to 24 games each.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And I guess that was a way of them trying to get some synergy, because they get limited practice time. They need to try and get some synergy in the arena before finals time. Wow. So where to for the 1UP guys? Did you guys get a chance to talk to them during the tournament about whether they'll be continuing to play together?
I spoke to, I believe, Guinea a little bit, and I think everything's quite up in the air there. Like, it must be difficult when they don't really have leagues going, they don't have comps going, they don't have trainings going, and I do know it's starting to probably wear on them. So I think some of them will still stick around, but I'm not really sure if we're going to see a full 1UP team in Hobart.
Yeah, I had a brief chat with Snake at the presentation dinner at the end, and it was kind of, a little bit up in the air. Like, if all of the boys are like keen to band together, they'll play again. But I guess there's so many things in the air, like whether their scene can like start to build back from where it is at the moment. Obviously, they're all, like Bootza alluded to, they're all getting quite old, and so responsibilities are starting to stack up for them. So maybe playing laser tag just isn't as much on the cards, but obviously we all hope to see them. Like, the 1UP boys are iconic. Everyone, they're all good lads, like outside the arena, inside the arena, they're fun to play against. I sincerely hope they stick around. So I guess in terms of improvements, assuming they're able to stay together, obviously, if the scene can build up to the point where they can play some team games, that'll be massive for them, I think, just to brush off like that arena dust. There's just like strategically, I guess, you can use all of the, or most of the, micro skills that you would play in a team game when you do base run, other than like field pointing and like the sniping mid type stuff. That's a little harder to replicate, but just knowing, having the reps and the keep having it fresh in your mind, like how to counter certain strategies, and like what to do when you're on the back foot, what to do once you start leading, what to do like when you're even with the other teams. That would be massive. But in the event that doesn't happen, something I've always noticed with 1UP in the past is they're all like extremely like strong, like pack on pack, all really brawly players, but I think sometimes they back it a little bit too much. So for instance, I go to 1UP space and I start taking a duel with probably any of them, to be honest. They'll often like back themselves to win that duel, and thus like they won't say anything, And so I remember like reffing them, or like just playing them myself, or like watching the other team do it to them. They'll back themselves to win a duel, they'll lose it, and then it's like, oh, back! And then, you know, the player's already in the base, shot out their last line, one shot on the base before their front person even just goes like, oh, crap, they're in the base. So, even if they can't play, like, the scene doesn't recover to the point where they can play team games, when they're doing their base runs, putting a massive emphasis on super crisp comms and less reliance on their brawling abilities, just, yeah, I think in my mind, especially in a defense, my priority list in my head is like comm the thing and then shoot the thing. That's the priority list in my head. So rather than like, you know, take the duel and then see if I win or lose and then say something, as soon as I see someone's about to activate in the next 3 seconds, this is something we've been pushing a lot in Adelaide, you say something. So for us, we say like loading backdoor. And then for the rest of your team, they know, okay, that player's about to activate in like 3 seconds. I have to be ready for a comm. And the difference for like being ready for a comm and then hearing it and like being able to react is so different to just like hearing like a really urgent comm like back now, and you're like, oh crap. So yeah, that's just something I've always noticed with them. I've always said like to my team and stuff like, man, I feel like 1-up would be like so hard to deal with if they just like calmed more. So yeah, that's all from me though.
You have anything to add to that, Syrex?
Yeah, going off of what Holmes was saying is, I think in the top 8, they were probably the team most lacking in rigid structure. So they're great at those loosey-goosey dump sort of games, even 3 outs, like heavy floats. But when you need a structure, when you have, you know, a 3-man attacking your base, or even a really good 2-man, they were probably the most lacking in those rigid defensive positions, which includes comms, positioning, paneling, things like that. Pretty often I would see them get caught out in the open as an attack would approach their base or things like that, or someone would just not be ready for somebody to come out of a certain area. So yeah, I think structure defensively, and even structure and attack a little bit as well. When they do attack, even when it's with numbers, they just throw people at a base and kind of hope for the best instead of knowing, I need somebody in this spot, somebody in this spot, and then somebody watching this store. So you'd see them, I think they copped a few denials off of that, where they've started shooting a base and not really known where their other players are.
They had a pretty high denial rate as well. So we had Morrow had a denial rate against him of like 1. Mus had 1.33. Obviously those two only played 2 or 3 games, so that's that's a thing. But Gunner had a denial rate on him of 1.17, Guinea 0.7, Dan 1.32. Yeah, all like not the highest denial ratios of the comp, but yeah, it's up there, and it kind of alludes to what Syrex was saying of just having a little bit of, I think the advantage an attack has against the defense is like the ability to be a little bit more fluid and dynamic, but there still needs to be some level of structure and rigidness to it. Otherwise you get caught out in those, those just like unlucky denials. But there is ways to try and reduce the amount of unlucky denials you can get, I guess.
I certainly also think, the fact that they haven't been challenged in their training a lot, it's probably says a little bit about, the mistakes that creep in. So they've been able, in their training previously, they've been able to make a dozen mistakes a game and still win the games, which is incredibly, dangerous when you go to a national titles. So, yeah, I've alluded to it in previous videos, but just to mention it again, it was the biggest shift I've seen, and now I guess Adelaide are validating this, is when you get to that stage of having a critical mass of players to train against, the level of play goes to another level, because you get to every week practice, not comming for like 80% of the game or 85% of the game well, comming for 100% of the game well, because if you don't, you lose your base and that kind of a thing. So it just gives you that practice of being able to focus for a full 12 minutes on not letting those little errors creep in. So yeah, let's really hope that we get a bit of a shot in the arm for the Melbourne scene, because yeah, we'd love to see those guys stick around and be able to like also steward the next generation through from Victoria as well, because their experience and knowledge and everything will be so handy for the next generation that come through. So let's really hope that can happen, and let's hope we see them in Tassie. It's just over the river, so they should be able to hopefully get across to that one. But yeah, I think. We'll move on from one up now, and we'll head on to 7th position. We have the WA Orcas finishing in 7th. We've got Hybrid, Flash, Rogue, Mr. Meeseeks, Wazzy Woo, and Simmy Bear. They were sync listed at 14th, so a cool 7 places higher than that. They went into after Cascade 2. They were in 10th. They climbed to 7th. They got 3 wins and 3/3 in the finals. Funnily enough. And climbed the same number of spots as one up, who got 3 wins and 3 seconds. So there you go. That can happen. So I mean, an absolutely amazing, impressive result from that team. They have on the base dump list, they had 3 double Ds. They had Hybrid at quad A, Flash at A, Rogue at B, and then the other 3 players were at double D. So to be able to achieve 7th place with 3 double Ds on the team is absolutely amazing, very impressive. Lauren, what did you see from the Orcas? What was the secret sauce for them? Why were they performing so well?
So I actually struggled with this team a bit when I was thinking about it, because at first I couldn't tell you. You're right, on paper this team doesn't look like a top 8. It looks like maybe 14th was a bit low, but yeah, a 10th to 12th sort of team. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I think they didn't make mistakes. So they didn't do anything flashy, they didn't do anything crazy, they were just solid. So everything they did well. They didn't try anything beyond their reach, and they utilized all their players pretty much to the absolute best of their ability. And when you look at the team, it is quite top heavy, Hybrid, Flash, Rogue, all great players we've seen for ages. And obviously Simmy's been around for a very long time. We've seen Mr. Meeseeks in the past, but on a lower team. I think he was on the Quackening for Darwin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
I think they just didn't make mistakes. Flash and Hybrid, my understanding is they haven't been around that much in the past year or so. So I think you could tell early in the comp they were looking a little bit rusty in round robin, but pretty much that was all it took. But come Cascades, they were back to their top form, and they could do essentially whatever the team needed them to do to get them the win. And I do believe a big jump for that this team was the maze. So you think about Hybrid was running their attack. Hybrid's never been known as a base cracker. He's not a, super fast cracking sort of player, but he can pack. So in an open arena where you don't have a defender inside the base, he could clean up. So if he ran around and shot everybody, it's pretty easy for his team then to get bases. Not only are they getting a ton of pack, they're getting bases reasonably well. They also were really good in those 5 base games, and they were really good at controlling the arena to create those 5 base games.
That's such a good observation about that. Holmes, did you see that from them as well?
Yeah, so funnily enough, despite them being in the top 8, I only actually think we versed them twice. So my understanding was that Rogue was the captain, though I'm not sure if he was leading in the game, if he was just an out of game captain. But yeah, what I do remember is the one game, because I might have even sat one of the other games with Versa. I only remember versing them once myself. But I ended up in defense at this point, and I saw a lot of Flash with an assortment of people like Rogue, and I think I saw him with Hybrid as well. Mainly those top 3. But that was also earlier in the comp where, Syrex alluded to, I think I heard the same thing where they haven't been able to play very much recently for whatever reason. And yeah, so I got them in that rusty phase where they were still trying to get click back into gear and stuff. But yeah, I definitely back the fact that what Syrex was saying in that they didn't seem to be doing anything crazy. It was a very standard game. And yeah, they didn't really slip up. Obviously, we say they've got these 3 double D players, but they were doing quite exceptionally well in the defense as well. One of the if it ends up being a high base game, where you see these rosters that are pretty like top heavy is where they really struggle, right? But they were able to make them not high base games, and you can't do that unless you're able to defend your own base, right? So kudos to those the guys that were like holding the defense at home. They must have been doing like, again, I apologize, I only remember versing you guys once, but they would have had to have been doing like an extremely good job. Just what I've been saying to my my up and coming league players or like newer Nats players and stuff, and what I always harp on is a lot of the time the difference between the top level teams and the bottom level teams isn't necessarily like they're just like that much better, like pack on pack and doing all the physical skills. It's a lot of the time a case of they've made all the mistakes that the newer players make, and so they just start making them less and less often. So it's a game of making less mistakes. And these guys did an exceptional job of following that to a T. So kudos to them for sure.
I really think this Frank's hybrid now as a really top level captain. I think with anything in life, right, if you put a bunch of limitations on how you can achieve a result, you have to go, you really need to go to another level in order to think outside the box to get the result right. So he's been given a team which doesn't have the best list that's ever got seventh, that's for sure. But he's managed to essentially lead that team, and like you said, not make mistakes, capitalize on the dumps, keep a lot of those games around the 4-5 base level. And fortunately as well, when you look down the Cascade 2 list into the winners column, there's a lot of games that probably 50% of the games were played, where the winning team ended up between 3 and 6 bases. So there was a lot of those games played, which would have played to their advantage a bit, because it meant they could just get, hybrid and flash their bases, maybe slip rogue through one. If a team panicked and dumped, they knew exactly how to respond. They got their other defenders through bases in that situation. And that observation you made, Lauren, about how the attacking side of it would have suited Hybrid's play, I think that's really valid. And he's just such a good around the arena pack accumulator. He would have been happy all day just to be firing at targets, building up score, and waiting for opportunities to piggyback and take advantage of teams that dumped. So, do we know much about these guys? Do we know much about whether they're planning to stick together and come back again next time?
I know. Oh, sorry, you go, Matt.
I think it's hard to say, but after the success of the team, I do know, like speaking to my presentation a bit, they would like to stick together to the best of their abilities. But I know that WA scene is probably been affected not as much as your Victoria or New South Wales, but we've definitely seen a slight decline since the pandemic. So hopefully they have opportunities to bring even more teams to Hobart. And in that case, you don't really know who's going to end up splitting off.
Yeah, I think one thing I was going to say about this team is they seem to have a really good sense of camaraderie. Outside of the arena, they were, they actually wanted to be there together, which funnily enough helps in performing well. So yeah, I think, and also speaking with Simi, she was super stoked about how these guys were going, and yeah, she was very happy about just she was able to get this team in the first place. So the impression I got is that I wouldn't be surprised if this team does stick together. But yeah, like Syrex was saying, depending on how things shift, it's hard to say sometimes. But also, just quickly wanted to give kudos to Wazzy Wu. This was his, this was their first nationals. I'm not sure if they've played a Laser Force nationals, but yeah, there was so many moments during Nats where people were yeah, let's go Wazzy, let's go. Because, whether it was in side events or it was a team game where, they performed, exceptionally well, yeah, everyone across the board seemed pretty impressed with Wazzy Wu, so congrats to them.
Very good. So, let's assume they're staying together then. Syrex, what do you think is the next level for them? How do they sort of creep up and start competing for Golden Games from there?
So, I think probably the thing that cost them getting any higher, and I mean they should be stoked with how they went, But what will break them up into that top 5 is so I think one of the pros to the team is their structure was great. So the structure defensively was fantastic. The structure of the team was good. But I also think it was their downfall once they got into those much higher games where that structure sort of became a bit too rigid. I didn't see them do a lot of like 3-man attacks. I didn't see them do a lot of hard floating. And I didn't see them do a lot of dumping. You saw the occasional one where, it was the call where they counter dumped or something like that. But they tended to, 2-3 most of the time. And I think if you want to get up into that top 5, you need to have a couple more things up your sleeve. So I think what they did this comp worked really well for them and got them higher than it should have. But the next step is essentially getting comfortable in the discomfort. So getting comfortable in the chaos of a less structured game.
Yep. Holmes, anything to add to that?
No, that's probably a pretty quaint observation and a good bit of feedback. Just carry on with the theme we kind of had in the previous videos of obviously we keep saying that this roster was pretty top heavy. So you've got a year till the next nationals, really putting in the time and the hours to try and round out the bottom half. Not that the bottom half aren't good players, they're definitely all good players, and I mean you don't get to top 8 without being a good player. But yeah, in those games where it goes past that 5 or 6 pays game, you need everyone on the team to be able to do both sides of the game, both the defensive and the offensive sides. So I'd encourage them to really put in the time and really grind in getting the bottom 3 just attacking more, I guess, and then also the top 3 defending more. When you spend heaps of time attacking, you forget little things about defending, I think. So maybe just do a straight swap, the top 3 swap with the bottom 3, and then that's how the game's run.
There's Holmes' advice. We got hybrid in last line. That's officially on the record. Holmes, boom.
Yeah, well the thing is, obviously it's just training. What have you got to lose? Every mistake you make, every loss you have, every failure is an opportunity to learn and grow, depending on how you treat it. So I'm all for doing crazy stuff like that. I know Aftershock we will do stuff where we put everyone in a role, or we usually don't swap the captain, but we put everyone in a role. What's the role you suck at? And they'll go oh, this one. And we'll go, well, you're playing that the whole night. And I was oh. But it's really important because, in a game where just, most games maybe you won't end up playing that position, that's cool. But in the game you do end up playing that position you don't normally play. You would hate to lose that game because of that. And that's, especially when you're cracking into that top tier and you're trying to make those pushes to get into the grand final.
I really think it adds to your overall awareness of what's happening in the arena as well. Suddenly, when you played somebody else's role a bit, you suddenly get those sympathies for those little nuances that they really like. So if you're suddenly floating around, you really see the value in that. The second last defender sort of pushing out and standing in that one spot to let you know that the base is still still okay and you can stay out, keep pushing. And if you're suddenly last lining and then you suddenly realizes how important the crispness of the call, that the backdoor call is, or how it has to be a certain earliness and stuff like that. So I really think that we're in the Maroons, when we really came together, it was when all 5 players kind of thought like captains. We could all play everybody else's role. We might not have been as good as each other on them, but the awareness that we all had expanded beyond just our sort of 6 or 7 square meters, and then suddenly became much bigger than that. So definitely think there's value in that. Massive congrats to the ORCAS. We really hope you guys do stick together and put the time in. Let's see what they can do. In Tassie, they're going to have the extra challenge of the bases are going to go back to a more traditional style as well. So we're going to have, I think from what CV's told us, there's going to be last line positions inside the base in all 3 bases. There's going to be up to 2 positions in 2 bases and 1 in a 3rd base. So it's going to return to that style. So let's see how they adjust to that as well. Okie dokie. So let's now move on to the Sunshine Coast Storm, who finished in 6th, made up of Firebird, Shock, Big Red, Kit Kat, Syrex, and Moss. They were finished Cascade 2 in 4th. They were sync listed at 8th. They finished the round robin in 6th, went down to 9th, but then back up to 4th. So they moved around a little bit and beat everyone in the tournament except for Catalyst and one other team. I wonder if Lauren could tell us who that other team might be a bit later. It was actually you, Holmes. It was Aftershock.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Yes. So absolutely awesome achievement, really sort of just followed on from what you guys did at Rumble. I thought you really took that step in Rumble and proved then at Nationals that it wasn't just a one-off. You guys have clearly gone up to another level. I'll let you talk about your team, Lauren, because you know them inside out. What do you think has been the secret to your success this year, and what has been the biggest growth in you guys as a team?
It's tough to talk about yourself, actually. Look, we were obviously quite happy with how we went. We were a little we did kind of want that top 5, so a little nickel of disappointment there, but what happens, and I think we learned a ton out of this Nats, and I think we learned a lot more than I thought we ever could over a Nationals, because there's only so much you can take in a week. Obviously, I felt like this team was in the not in a negative way, but we were a little bit of a time bomb. We had 3 rookies, we had 1 small child essentially, and there was a lot of things that could have gone wrong that didn't go wrong, and so I think that the whole team did really well. I'm super proud of all my guys, because everybody pretty much performed to what I thought was their best. I think something we did well was just we treated ourselves like a top 5 team. So where every game was a serious team chat, every game was rewatched. We got in pretty early and got a lot of training in, and even just leading up to the comp. I never told any of my kids or any of our young guys that this is a development team. I never told them we were a mid-tier team. They always knew that we were going to aim as high as we possibly could, and I think that did definitely benefit us quite well. I think we did play the comp in terms of what Cascade we peaked in. Well, not that it was planned; it just sort of worked out. But we ironed out some stuff in round robin. We had a Cascade then to fix up some other stuff, and then after that, we felt a lot more confident, and I think you saw that in Cascade too.
You guys was Shock running the attack, or was it Firebird running the attack?
Firebird running the attack, and he would generally take Shock out first.
Okay. He performed really well. He ended up with AA in his ranking. So how did it feel internally with Firebird running the attack?
Yeah, it felt really good. It had been a bit since he had done it, because when he was on Behemoth, Dark Passion was running it, but obviously we've seen him run Sovereign in the past. I think big kudos to Firebird, and I think that's something we forget, is he hasn't spent a lot of time in the top 10. So even though they got a top 10 finish, they spent more of their time around 15th. So in terms of those high level games you get, when you're playing first, second, third, he hasn't been in a ton of those, and he handled it really well, because those games are kind of a whole new ball game than the mid-tier sort of stuff. So I thought he did fantastic. Obviously, Shock, it was his first Nats, so to have to go out first against teams like Catalyst, teams like Aftershock, he held his own quite well.
He kept it all together when he was coming up against the brick wall. That is a fully loaded defense.
Yeah, and that's a tough role. Going out first is, it feels feels like a lot of pressure on your shoulders. The defenses are probably the hardest they're going to be the whole game. It's easy to feel like you're getting beat up on from all sides.
Totally, yeah. And what did you see from the Storm, Holmes? You guys beat them a few times, so you must have kind of had them covered a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was I think Storm just always played. Well, it was a little bit of a mirror match between Storm and us. It felt strategically, it felt like we were in general trying to do pretty much the same things. So I think we really like the games where it feels like everyone's kind of doing the same thing. We sometimes struggle when things start to get crazy and chaotic and stuff. So I think that's probably why, like a bit of why we did well against the Storm, is because, you know, when you've got two teams that are playing a certain way, it's kind of hard for the third team to do anything but that without just conceding a loss, basically.
Yep.
So yeah, a lot of our games would end up just being everyone's playing a mirror match standard, and it was a little bit of a slower game, which also suits us. We enjoy those lower base ones. So yeah, but every like Syrex was saying, these guys weren't just like a development team, they weren't just some mid team. Like, they definitely deserve to be where they were every game we were in. Where it was not like, all right, well, Storm's in, so yeah, like, who's the other team again? Oh yeah, let's worry about them. That was never a conversation that happened, right? We're always talking about the Storm as if they're any other top tier team and are treating them the same. Again, to throw some kudos to Brock, or to Firebird, sorry. Yeah, he felt like he belonged. Like, we're saying that he hasn't played much in that top tier, but he felt like he belonged very much so. You know, he often was like at our base, like sometimes by himself, but it was still like, it was not like, oh, it's only one person. It's like, all right, crap, Firebird's around, we have to like I was saying before, like, we can't afford to make a mistake or we're gonna lose a base right now. So yeah, he was definitely really stressful where he was around. I remember Fuggan on my team would come out of a bunch, like pretty much every game actually against you guys, he would come out of the game, he would be like, man, Firebird is so good. Like, he was just like dumpstering on me the whole game. So yeah, he deserves all the respect in the world. And then obviously, like, the rest of this roster played like exceptionally well. They didn't feel like first year players, they feel like they're, you know, they belong there. Super impressive. And yeah, just didn't make very many mistakes. Like we keep saying, you know, the top tier teams are the ones that just make less mistakes than the mid tier teams. For like a lot of it, that is what the difference is between the middle and the top, is how many mistakes you make in a game. So yeah, it never felt like we won against Storm, you know, like we just like because they made a mistake or something. It felt like we had to really play hard and just like outplay. We didn't get gifted any wins. So, and then also I guess we have to throw some kudos to was it Moss or Shock that won juniors? Sorry, it was Moss, right?
Moss got juniors, Shock got rookie of the year.
Ah, crikey. You can't be sad about that. That's like a super, like a really cool accomplishment. Massive kudos to them. And juniors is no joke. Like, it's pretty, like, when you look at the players in there, there's like, geez, like, you know, this is winning that is no, like, oh, I just won juniors, like, whatever. It's like, yeah, massive kudos to Moss for winning that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to maybe shout out to Big Red as well. Like, he's ranked in at double B. That's probably the highest I've seen him rank on the solo ladder at any tournament. Where did you have him playing, and did you notice that he was doing so well?
Definitely. So Brad was usually like our second out.
Yeah, okay.
So second defender to second out. I think he's gone a long way from his old Renegades last line sort of roles. I actually feel like he's no longer. Last line is no longer his best role. Like, I like him on a door. I like him getting bases. He's got a lot of assets in that regard. Like, he's got a surprisingly good reach. I think he's not somebody you think about when you think of reach, but it's there. When he moves and he lunges, like he can get those cracks and he can get those bases. So that's definitely something he's been working a lot on. I think the team as a whole actually worked well because we had a lot of utility. We didn't really come to Nats knowing what role everyone was going to play. We sort of got into training and figured it out from there. So nothing was particularly set. So actually, interestingly, I think I played the least number of games because I got really sick. I think I sat almost all of Cascade 1. And I just sent the kids in to do their best without me. And they did great.
Yeah, you had 15 games and the next last was Shock with 19.
Yeah. So really, that's definitely one of the benefits of having a young team. They can go play all the games when I can't do it. And...
Yeah, I think also seen, just to finish on Big Red, I've also seen him as a real confidence player in the past. And I think you having faith in him to not just stand inside a base, but to be first out, essentially, or second out in attack and have a real important role on that team would have no doubt filled him with confidence, which would have got the maximum, a much greater amount of his capacity out of him. Because even in 2015, when he was on, he was really good. It was a bit of inconsistency. He was a lot newer back then, a lot of inconsistency between his games, but clearly he's like narrowed that gap now to be able to achieve double B. He would have been much more consistent in his performances. So that's a real credit to you guys for, getting the maximum out of your players.
And he definitely had a,
what do you think is the next step for you guys? Sorry, you finish, Lauren.
I was gonna say, like, Brett had a tough role on his shoulders because not only, did he have to step into this new role, if when he was in defense, especially if I wasn't there, he had to keep the kids calm. He had to, he had to be the decisiveness and he had to be the thinker and he had to make sure that things were working and fix them when they weren't. So he had a lot riding on his shoulders this year, just as much as Brock and I. At the moment, it looks like we're gonna stick together as best we can. We have currently lost Kit Kat because they've moved up to Rockhampton. So they might still hop on a Queensland team because they are coming back down to train as much as they can, but obviously they can't train as much as the rest of us, so maybe they'll help take a younger team over. But yeah, the other 5 of us are already locked in, hoping to stay together and get into it. I'm interested to see how we go in Hobart because it is, like you said, a bit more of a traditional maze, which is what we have at home. So there's a lot of adapting we had to do to Bendigo because it was so much different from anything we've ever, well, especially the young guys have ever even seen. So being in a maze that is a bit smaller, a bit more defensive, and a bit more what we're used to, I think we should do pretty well if we stick to it.
Oh mate, another year with under the belt for Moss and Shock. Like it's you guys could really elevate next year with another year experience under their belt. What do you think, Holmes? What do you think? What did you see that is the next evolution for the Storm?
Yeah, I mean, there's the cop-out answer of just like another year of training, right? Using all of, like Syrex was saying, like they learnt so much from this national, so like really like building from that and not like, it's happened to teams I've had in the past where it feels like you kind of like start from scratch sometimes. But if you can really build upon what you learn like at the nationals, you're already like the version of your team after a year of training should like absolutely demolish the version of the team at the start. So as long as like keep your trainings productive and stuff, like you'll be able to accomplish that goal for sure. I guess back on Big Red a little bit. We share like a hobby of like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I was spoken to him quite a lot during the comp and the pre-nats and stuff, more than I had before. Super nice guy, super like humble, but like you were kind of saying, Bootza is a bit of a confidence player, and I think Big Red, you just got to back yourself, mate. All right, you're a beast, you're a monster. Back
yourself, Big Red.
Rather than be like, oh, this guy's so good, like, what? No. I don't really care who this guy is. I'm just gonna like dumpster on him. You know what? Just back yourself a bit more, mate. And I think in like everything in life, I guess as well, not just laser tag. Something I say to my or pretty much like everyone in Adelaide is like trying to avoid like looking at the players you're coming up against and like actually associating like a name or like a skill level to them or anything. It's just like another person with a pack that you can shoot. I found myself over the years, every time I started going like, oh my god, that's like Grub, which I still do, by the way. I don't follow my own advice. Grub is he just demolishes me. But if you like are coming up against a player and you're like, oh my god, it's like that really good player, and then like you've already like reduced your chance of winning the duel. It's like one of those mental things. It's a little bit harder to quantify. But when you start going into games and you don't really care who that person is that you're about to duel, that's half of the battle. And yeah,
you're putting energy into something which is completely unproductive, which is thinking about how good another player is rather than how you're going to execute, essentially, or just staying in your flow and executing. It's so true, that piece of advice. Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise I don't have anything specific. Like I was saying, it didn't really feel like you guys made mistakes in the games that we versed you. It just felt like we were able to make more plays like quicker than you guys were, and so we would just end up leading the game. And like we've been saying in the last videos, like once a team starts leading, or once your team starts like dropping behind, it is really hard to catch up against those, especially against the top tier teams. So yeah, just keep going.
I do think so. Probably our biggest weakness this tournament was time. So we knew what to do, we knew roughly when to do it, and we knew how to counter things, we knew how to achieve things, but we did it 10 to 20 seconds later than everybody else. So our switches, our base takes, our reloads, our getting onto dumps, things like that, we were probably just behind the 8 ball. So that 10 seconds adds up over the course of a game. So I think that was probably one of the biggest things we can work on, and one of the biggest things that cost us getting into that top 5. I think we saw that the most on System D-Day, when those games are super hard. You have to work for every tag, you have to work for every base, and I think that's when we saw it stack up against us.
Yep, totally. It's that I think once, like, you guys clearly don't make you make very few strategical errors. I know that from training against you guys all the time locally. So I know that you're going to respond well, and the evolution, which comes from just more experience with all of the players, particularly the young players, is the speed at which you can turn defense into attack. So when your base is under attack, the attackers leave. How quickly have you converted your floaters into attackers, and start pushing your players out? And those, like you said, those 5, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, those little things here and there will add up to, it'll just be that extra base. You'll just get that one extra opportunity. You might create an extra 2 or 3 opportunities a game to get bases. You might convert one of those opportunities, and there's your 3,000 points essentially per game that you need. So it's such a tiny little thing, and it's just takes some time to get to that final piece. But no doubt you guys will get there. You've got all the ingredients that you need. I'm really stoked that you guys are sticking together. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys train and continue to grow over the next year. And we're going to move on to now our 5th place team. We have Apex. They finished 5th. They finished Cascade 2 in 8th. They were sync listed at 7th. They beat everybody in the tournament except for the Spartans. They had 3 wins, 2 seconds, and a third in finals. And they got themselves into a couple of golden games, which was huge. Once you start playing off in, golden games, especially if you get multiple of them in a year, it really, really helps lift your experience level. So we got Bonfire, Memeless, Marmaduke, Shaky, Spack Attack, and Benson. And I might kick off with you this time, Holmes. Know these guys inside out. They've been around for a long time. They have probably, in my opinion, turned the corner at the Rumble. They seem to have gone to another level in terms of their game awareness, their strategy. What can you tell us about how they played and what you saw from them in the tournament?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think this iteration of Apex is the best I've ever seen. And it shows in their results. Like, I think the highest they've gotten before was 9th, maybe 7th, but I'm pretty sure it was 9th. So to be able to get all the way to 5th place, it kind of just speaks volumes. I don't even have to tell you that this is the best Apex has ever been. They've just proved it. So I mean, strategically, what we had was Memeless was the in-game leader. He was the in-game and their lead attacker, and they had Marmaduke was their opening batsman. They play a pretty standard game. Initially 3 defense, 2 attack, and Memeless and Marmaduke are just a force to be reckoned with. They're both athletic. Marmaduke's gotten really tall. The last people would have seen of him would have been 2019 on a previous iteration of Aftershock, and he's just shot up since then. And he's still growing, I think, which is just not fair. Really long reach, left-hander as well. So yeah, between just their athleticism and Zach's physical features and Caleb's probably your average build kind of thing. Even if you take that away, they're brothers, and they're brothers that just obviously they spent so much of their lives together. And what you see when you see people that have spent so much of their time together outside of the game, that's when you start to see these like things that are a little harder to quantify and like really point out, but they just play off of each other super, super, super well. Just a force to be reckoned with. If, you know, you play a game against Apex, you know, start off standard 3D to attack. If Meaningless and Marmagic get off to a good start, it's like, it's pretty damn hard to keep up with them. They can like, once they have that lead, they're really hard to catch up on. Like they play, like especially now, I think they're playing the smartest they ever have in terms of like being able to keep that lead and like really like knowing the team that's the threat to them and just like countering everything they try to do. Like, you know, just like stay down there. No, you stay down there. And then in doing so, they just end up pushing their lead. In trainings at home, like it's always super competitive between Apex and Aftershock. But something I think I've noticed is when Apex win their games, they win them like point wise, like very convincingly. So yeah, they're super hard to catch up on once they get a good start. For the rest of the roster, I think Bonfire, every year he's consistently like, I'm pretty sure he hasn't not been in the top 10 on the solo ladder every year. He's just like an absolute beast. He at home, he's like probably the only player at home that I really struggle to deal with. Like, let's say like we're both playing that mid kind of role, and we're both field pointing at like different ends of the arena. He's one of the best field pointers we have. I think he is the best field pointer we have in Adelaide, and like one of the best in Australia as well. He's like really, he just does all these like little micro things. And like every time you try and deal with him, he's just like one step ahead, and like is like, oh, damn.
I heard about Robin going into some kind of god mode, and I actually saw it in Albury. I was reffing a game, and he was in green base, and he was basically walking inside green base from one end to the other, just basically keeping people out of it. And he came out with 16, 17k, and I was just, he was seeing things before they happened. Essentially, he just got so in the zone. I'm not sure if this happens regularly with him. If he's like in the zone, he was firing at targets before they were even. I was like, he should not have known that person was there, but he did somehow. So yeah, he's quite incredible. How are they playing him in Bendigo? What role did he play?
I think he's playing a little bit more of like that mid position. You know, floating up and crunching back on defense and stuff. Just putting in a position where he can just, wherever he is getting tags. And yeah, he does it very, very well. I think, yeah, it does feel like he has like the gift of foresight sometimes. Like you said, like he's just like knows what's about to happen. Like, especially in those like I was saying, like in our arena, like I'll be field pointing, he'll be field pointing. We're both trying to field point the same place, so we have to deal with each other first. And he beats me in those, like, probably 65 to 75% of the time. He just always, like, knows where I'm going to be. And I'm like, you shouldn't know I was going to come from there. That's not fair. So, yeah, he's, absolute beast. Then we had...
I think it was a good move for them to put him in that role. I think it leverages his skill set the best to have him not actually opening up the attack, let him actually just accumulate score. Were they getting him out second on attack? Is that what they were typically doing, or just letting him run in the mid?
I'm pretty sure the next out on attack was Shaky. I could be mistaken. Forgive me, boys. It was probably between like Bonfire and Shaky. Yeah. I guess to talk about the rest of the boys, so yeah, we had Shaky, Spack Attack, and Benson. Benson and Spack Attack just consistently, like, you know, they're the like the defensive, like absolute rocks of the team. Yeah, Spack has a thing of like every Nats is like, I don't know how he does it, but I'm pretty sure the last few nationals he's actually gotten the highest denial average. We could fact check this. But I'm pretty sure the last few nationals, you look at the solo ladder on base dump and you sort it by denials for, he has the highest. Like, a bunch
ZLTAC
of times.
has the highest?
Yeah. He's
Wow.
he's just like, I don't know, it's just his thing. He loves it. That's his
He doesn't
biggest like
deliberately let
bragging
people
rights.
get shots in, does he? Is it just
He
a
definitely
thing that
does.
happens?
He definitely
Oh, he
does.
does,
He
okay.
definitely, like, you know, they've put one shot in and he's like, oh, I'm gonna wait a bit. Oh no, I'm gonna let him put that one more in to boost my average. That's 100% a thing that goes through his mind. But I mean, it works. It pays off for him. I'm sure sometimes it doesn't, which it definitely doesn't sometimes. But he has a bit of fun with it, and yeah, he's gone and done it again this nationals. Benson, my understanding is consistently he's like, I've heard people say it before. He's like a bit of an underrated player, I think, pack on pack, like in duels and stuff. Like he always does quite well on LOR. I distinctly remember a game where we versed them, and I was doing quite well one-on-one against, like, I ended up having a bunch of like little pockets where I was dueling each of them, and I was having a good game, so I was doing quite well. But as soon as I came up against Benson, I just started like, you know, he just started beast moding on me, and I was like, geez, like people kind of sleep on him a bit. So big kudos to Benson, and I think I've actually heard Fuggin say it before that Benson was like, especially out of the game, like the most valuable player for the team. He's a super smart dude, and he's got a really good mind for the game and for everything pretty much. So he's super valuable on a team. Even if you had him on a team and he didn't play, obviously he's not going to want to do that. But if he were to do that, he would still be like an enormous asset for that team. So yeah, big kudos to Benson. And then Shaky, this is his second year. So he played in 2020, he played on BPEX with Spack and Benson again, but then they played with Akira and Harkrage, and I might be forgetting someone. Ooh. I might be forgetting some. Apologies. Yeah, he's just becoming like a bit of a powerhouse. You know, he's a tall boy. Well, not like super tall, but he's like 6 foot. Probably 6 foot, maybe a little bit higher than 6 foot. Wax is spamming me messages on Discord. Stop that, Wax. I'm going to talk smack about Wax when we get to him later now, because he's done that and interrupting my little spiel. But Shaky's getting really good. He's got like a bit of a broader build, so when he's brawling and he's coming up against people in duels and stuff, he's really hard to deal with. Left-hander as well, always like a good thing to have. And yeah, no, he just the only thing with Shaky is he gets in his own head quite a bit, and like, you know, he starts to get a bit frustrated and stuff. And then as soon as that like, no matter who you are, like if you start getting like in your own head and start getting angry, you're just not making good decisions and not playing as well. So yeah, when Shaky's in like, you know, in that like he's having a role, he's like a powerhouse. He's really hard to deal with. So
Lauren, what did you guys see from Apex?
So I feel like we played Apex quite a bit. Probably every Cascade played them once or twice. So I feel like we did play them a lot, and I played them a ton in
5
Rumble.
times apparently. Yes, there you go.
Yeah. So I actually like really liked Apex this year. I thought, like you had said before, Bootza, yeah, they really turned a corner at Rumble and they kept going with it this year. I think they're a team that's really easy to underrate, because even I still picture them as children. Like I still picture most of those guys as, you know, when I first met them when they were much younger, but they're not kids anymore. They know what they're doing and they can do it, and they can do it well. And what I really liked about this team was they very much played their own game. They didn't worry too much about the meta. They didn't worry about the meta shifts. They did what they do best at all times, which I think worked to their advantage more often than it didn't. So they do play a very proactive strategy. And I do really think it's great how well they can take some of their younger guys out first and still consistently get bases. So, you know, get Marmaduke out there. I saw Shaky out a lot. I think they actually saved Bonfire till later in the game because they know he can pick up a clutch base when they need it. So I did see him often being the person getting pulled when we need a base. It's going to be tough, and he was the one that could do it. And on top of that, he got so much packed from defense. Like I remember watching a game and wondering what role he was in. I thought he must be field pointing, he must be the mid, and I found out afterwards he was practically last line that game, and he still came out with 12k 2 bases. So the utility they have on that team and the like raw firepower really sets them up for success. I think this maze did suit them, but not so much that they didn't have to adapt in any way. But we definitely saw them change up their game plan. And I think they were the only team that really pulled off that bounce dump well. So that bounce dump worked really well at Pre-Nats 3. I remember them pulling it out, and I remember coming home and going, oh, what are we going to do about this? And I actually think we never really came up with a fantastic answer to it. And we watched them pull it throughout the comp. And any team around their level still struggle with it. It didn't work against teams, your top 3-4 kind of teams did really well against it. But any team around them, they definitely could pull that out and use it against them. And they did, and it worked probably more than it should have.
It's
But that was a regular strategy they were going with, was it? They were going with the bounce dump quite a bit.
When they had to pull it out, that was what they pulled out. They used it less and less because obviously it got less and less effective the more they used it. So they did stop. Probably, I don't think they did much Cascade 2, and they didn't do a ton Cascade 1, but we saw them do it in Round Robin. We saw them pull it back out in System D. So when they did need to dump, they could dump effectively, and their bounce dump was probably the most effective in terms of them getting points. And the bounce dump was really interesting in Bendigo because it took away some of your options. So, what do you do when someone is bounce dumping? You have to commit to keeping them out. And if you can't, then what do? You can't counter dump because then you've got 15 people fighting over one base. You can't counter dump to the empty because that's just stupid. So you have to almost counter bounce dump and keep the third team out, which is ridiculously hard to coordinate as a reactive sort of game. So when they pulled it off, they pulled it off. When they didn't pull it off, it was hard, but I'd say only teams that ended above them were the ones that could do that consistently.
Yeah. It's so true. Like, I always try to think about, against top teams, how are we going to make this team play in an uncomfortable way, play left-handed, like play the game that they don't really want to play. And for me as a captain, the thing that would be most undesirable to see is a team base dumping. And even if they're not getting my base, they're getting the other base and then coming back. And then then they might spend a bit of time and get it. And then they get the other base and get it and come straight back again. And at that point, you've got to make, like you said, you've got to make a decision. Are you going to end up with 15 players at one base? Are you going to try to, you have to make a call on what you do. And it's probably one of the most trickiest sets of decisions. So getting effective at that, I can see how that would have caused a lot of headaches for teams.
We call it we call it a pain train locally.
I do.
Yeah, because it is painful when it happens. It's something that Adelaide teams actually pull out sometimes locally. Like, I didn't really see the other teams pull it out during the comp, but it's definitely an Apex thing that they love doing, and it's their Hail Mary, right, well, we're definitely not winning this game, let's just go for something and try and make this as chaotic and crazy as possible. They just have I think a lot of the time with a pain train, the momentum is super important when it does get countered, because I've seen it before, and I've seen it locally, and I've seen it at nationals as well. The times they don't work is when the train halts at a base for too long and they kind of lose steam. But so strategically, if the team can get a bit of momentum and stuff, it's really hard to deal with. But that also applies to Apex as a whole. They get that first base. I think Caleb or Memeless is really good for this team for the positive vibes and stuff. And he'll always be trying to do it, but then they get that first base. They're losing the games, maybe their heads are dropped a bit, and they get that first base, and they're Caleb's bounce, 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 and he's pushing the pace. They get to the next base, and then they get that, and Caleb celebrates, and he goes bounce, 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 and then maybe now the rest of them start catching on. They all start screaming alright, this is the thing. We're just gonna win this game now, even if they don't think they're gonna win it. They have that energy. We are demolishing this game. No one can beat us. So as a team and strategically, once the momentum gets there, it's super hard to deal with. So naturally, it suits them very well.
That's a good segue. How are they going to crack through to the next? How are they going to start winning golden games? Because that's kind of the next stage for them now. They got a golden game this year. We will talk about that golden game actually, because memorable. It was against Aftershock and Spartans. In a very interesting game that played out. We'll maybe talk about that during the next team, which is yours, there, Holmes. But yeah, they were pretty soundly beaten in that. In the end, what is the next evolution for them? How are they going to win gold game?
Yeah, I think they will have a better chance at winning a golden game when they start to believe that they can, in my opinion. So just from an outward perspective, whenever they would get into games that were quite tough, so especially when they were playing, Spartans, Catalyst, that kind of stuff, they played a very proactive strategy. And by that I mean they would pull these bounce tips, but they pull them quite early in the game. So, they'd obviously go into the game going, this is going to be the call, like we're going to do our thing. And I feel like as soon as teams go into a game with such a aggressive strategy, they kind of set themselves on the back foot, because dumping works much best when it's a bit more reactive, so a bit later in the game. It's the earlier you do it, the more time every other team has to know what you're doing, adjust to it, react to it, and it's very easy to get caught on the back foot. So I think it's great that they know they have this sort of strategy in their arsenal, but if they played it a little bit more reactively instead of proactively, I think that'll definitely step them up, because they've proven they can play a standard game. They played 2-3s fantastically, even against other good teams. I think they played more standard games against Storm than dumps, and they did really well every time. I think anytime we played them, it was always close. We were taking games off each other, but it was never a walk. So I think, as soon as they get a little bit more confidence and they don't ever go into a game going, we're playing Catalyst and the Spartans or Eclipse or Aftershock or things like that, and they don't go into a game going, we're probably going to have to pull a dump this one, I think they'll start to do a lot better. Because I do also think a couple times we saw them get off to like a ripper start of a game. They would dump or they would bounce dump or something. They'd get 8 bases, and then you'd watch them almost like shrink away a little bit. Like you'd watch them go, we've been denied a couple times now. I'm a bit afraid. Like, I don't think we're going to get these last 2. And that's what will lose them the game, instead of, keeping up that momentum that you were talking about.
Yeah, sure. Have you got anything to add to that, Holmes?
Yeah, I think, well, for one, something I do know about the team is that, throughout Nats, and I think even, the Rumble as well, they just got, really run down, and, a bunch of them. I'm pretty sure the entire team was sick at one point, just, not energized, not in a fit state to be playing high-level laser tag. They were still doing, a very good job in spite of that. But, yeah, I don't know. Eat a few more veggies, guys. Apple a day, all of that. Just look after yourselves a bit more once you go away. It's really easy once you get to a comp to kind of let that slip. Obviously, it's really busy, time-wise, sometimes, trying to eat well and, stay on top of all of these things, and it's hard work, but, man, imagine how well you could have done if everyone was, at 100% physical playing ability, So, that's having a bit of a jest with that, but it's also, a valid thing. It's just a fact. Your team's not going to play as well if everyone's sick as dogs versus if everyone's feeling good. Otherwise, just they're a really good team. All of the individuals on that team are super good at the physical skills and stuff. Always no duel against any of them is ever easy. I think one of the things I do slip sometimes is just an overextension, I guess you could call it. And this is a thing that's existed with the team since it started in Adelaide, and it's a thing I've always been able to find a way to abuse. Personally, they just drop a few too many easy bases, and that might just be off the back of a slight overextension or by one of the defenders. I think I've seen all of them make the mistake of extending a little bit too far, and then loosening the defense a little bit too much, which creates this little hole, and then that's when that player is able to zip through, shoot a bunch of people in the back, and then take a free base. So, we keep saying, the top tier teams just they don't make very many mistakes, and I think that is one of the mistakes that I've seen Apex make semi-consistently over the years, even still to this day, is just getting a little bit too excited, overextending a bit, and the one time you overextend a bit will be the one time that you lose a base, and then maybe that'll be during a golden game or something. So just finding a way to deal with that, and then kind of what I was saying with 1UP before, where because they're all such strong pack-on-pack players, sometimes they'll back themselves to win a duel instead of like comming something. And I know at training it was something like Aftershock would get a bunch of bases because someone would back themselves to win a duel and not say anything. They would lose the duel, and then they lose a base because of it. Even at the very least, if you say like loading and the door you're on like 3-ish seconds before the duel takes place, I think they'll drop like a bunch less bases. So yeah, those are my main criticisms and bits of feedback for them.
All good, very good advice. And like all those things that you mentioned aren't difficult to tidy up. You guys have got lots of good teams to train against now. So those kinds of things you assume will start to close up. And what you guys were saying also about just, how you look after yourself essentially at Nats, it's a marathon, right? So, and you need to be playing your best games after you've already played 50 and 10 days and everybody's sick and all the things. You need to be able to play your best at that point. So those little mistakes that made are often due to a lack of energy or dropping concentration just because of a lack of energy. So the better you look after yourself, the longer you can concentrate for, and the better you can be playing deep into the games at the deepest part of the week. So yeah, best of luck to the Apex guys. Yeah, well done on such a big turnaround over the last couple of years. We can't wait to see what you guys do next year in Tassie. We really hope you're going to be there, and I'm looking forward to being there and seeing some of these long-armed lefties that you talk about.
It's not fun.
Alrighty. Let's talk about the fourth place team, Aftershock, who only dropped one position from a very good finish of third place after the Cascade 2. They have Holmes, Chutch, Fuggan, Mikey, Dossie, and Beefy. They beat everyone but Catalyst and Bendigo Blitz, funnily enough. You guys didn't pitch a game off those guys.
Yeah.
You might be able to expand a little bit for me, Holmes. You guys finished the round robin in 10th, but then quickly moved up to your rightful position around 3rd or 4th and stayed there for the majority of the comp. Had a win, a second and and 2/3 in finals, and you played all 3 golden games, which is a huge achievement.
Yeah, we did.
I need to find out from the horse's mouth exactly what happened in the 3rd golden game. But before we get into that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about, what the how you went during the comp and what was the secret of your success? Why did you guys finish high this year? And what was it that was happening for you guys inside the arena that was working?
Yeah, so we had the roster change from last year to, from Darwin Nats to this Nats was Fancy Boy stopped playing, and we were able to pick up Fuggan, which was like a really, really good pickup for us. So this year, I was saying to the boys, I was going to make a joke. There's a running joke between us of literally no one knowing who actually captains Aftershock. All the previous streams, like at pre-Nats and like Darwin Nats, we hear like everything except the right answer. So I've heard like,
That's
Beefy's
right?
captaining, Holmes is captaining. No, not me. It's usually like Beefy or I are the names that get thrown out. 2020 it was Mikey, okay, just to set the record straight. And then this year it was Fuggan. So just before I say anything, Fuggan was the captain and in-game leader. Okay, done. Right.
I wonder nobody can keep track, mate. You keep changing it from year to year, so...
yeah,
really
obviously.
Your fault, not everybody else's fault.
Yeah, something like that. But, so yeah, Fuggan was our in-game leader and in-game captain, and captain out the game. And our lead attacker. I was the opening batsman. And then the next out would usually be Mikey. And then the next out after that would be, it was like a toss-up between Chutch or Dossie, depending on like who was easiest to get to, I guess. I guess our strategy didn't evolve like crazy amount. Like we played a very standard game like the whole comp. And it was just like small adjustments in terms of how the defense is set up and how we set up our attacks is like really what separated how we played at the beginning versus the end. But for the most part, you know, the idea was I would go out and I would get 1 or 2 bases, and then I would go home, and then we would get some more. Yeah, there wasn't too much crazy to it. It was just trying to play a standard game and trying to do, you know, the standard stuff better than everyone else, like trying to have a more successful attack than the other teams, and then trying to have a stronger defense than the other teams. It's that was a lot of the way like we kind of thought about it. So
it was funny because you got your average score. You're the only team in that top 8 where your average score kind of stayed the same, whereas every other team, you know, that's the pattern, right? They play round robin where, you know, theoretically they are going to try and just blow their average score up to as high as possible, because that's what separates, you know, having a higher average score separates the teams. So they go for a high score in round robin, and then things tighten up in cascades when you're playing all teams around you on the ladder. You guys didn't follow that pattern. You just decided to have a kind of a similar average score all the way through. What was that? Was that because of the way you were playing? You were playing just that consistent brand every game?
Yeah, it was a case of, so for us, like, the lower base games do suit us. We very much back our defense. I think we have one of the strongest defenses of the comp. Just based off like reffing and like playing and stuff, I think we have a super tight defense, and the comms are like some of the best that I've seen. You know, got to toot our horn a little bit. Come on. But the idea is like, if we can go out and get a couple bases and then no one gets our base, like we're in a pretty damn good spot. And so yeah, we did have chats about like, you know, in those games where we verse a lower tier team, like 2 lower tier teams, like, oh, we could boost our average, but it was kind of like we just wanted to have more and more reps of doing the standard strategy over trying to boost our average score. We didn't really care. Like, I think I said in one of the other ones, it was like, we don't really care where we place throughout the comp, as long as like we're in our best shape on the last day, playing winning the games that matter, which didn't end up happening. But anyway, yeah, the focus was getting better at the standard setups and stuff versus trying to get high scores. And yeah, I think actually in 2020, Darwin Nats, we actually had the lowest average score of the top 10 as well.
Right.
Yeah, I guess we like to play a slower, more controlled game. You know, once we're winning, we don't go crazy about like pushing the lead kind of thing. We're like happy to like sit where we are and just like keep the status quo kind of thing. So that's why a bunch of our games end up being these lower average scores. Yeah.
I guess the only thing that way it impacted you really is you spent Cascade 1 probably playing a bunch of teams that you really didn't need to play.
Yeah, 100%.
So probably maybe missed out on a few more games against some of those top teams. That's probably the only blemish really in your week, essentially. Everything else went pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, we actually struggled quite a bit in round robin. We fell into the trap. So we did so much. We did heaps of training. I think we did some of the most training out of the other teams. Definitely in like the top 3. And in doing so, we found like all of these, like a lot of the focus was about making our defense just like impossible to attack, like making it the best defense of the comp. And we fell into this trap of like, we kept finding these little micro things that we could change in the defense when players and teams were doing like a very specific thing. And we ended up just having like too many tools to deal with too many jobs, rather than just having like handful of tools to deal with like most situations. So that was like a lot of the struggle with our round robin is we just had so many, like too many little intricacies to try and make it the best defense ever, which were valid things, but it was just like too hard to keep on top of it whilst trying to balance all the things like the standard stuff like comming and paneling and taking duels and timing and all of that. So yeah, round robin, we went too crazy with the specifics. And then in Cascade 1, whilst we also versed easier teams, that also where we started just stripping it back and making it simple, and then like slowly trying to creep back to like all the things that we had before. We didn't end up getting all the way there, but yeah, that was a thing, and it was a very valuable lesson of just like, you know, getting a bit too excited and implementing too many steps when, like, you know, just needed to chill a bit.
Yeah, it's such a massive lesson, hey, finding that balance between the complexity you need to, you know, structure your team well, but also the simplicity so it's practical and people can actually play at their best, because the more you're thinking, the less you're just, you start losing your timing and you start forgetting comms because you're thinking too much about other things. So there's like that perfect balance where it's complex enough to be able to put a good strategy together, but nice and simple, so everyone can just go in and play their natural game as much as possible.
Yeah, there's definitely a balancing game there.
What did you see, Syrex, from Aftershock?
Yeah, I feel like we missed you guys a bit. I think I must have sat like one or two of your games, because I feel like personally I didn't play you a whole lot.
I don't remember seeing you.
Yeah, because I think we didn't play each other Cascade 1. I think we played each other once in Red Roll, once Cascade 2. Because I remember in System D-Day, when we came up against you guys, I was worried because we hadn't played you enough. Like, I didn't feel... Yeah. From the outside, like, watching the games, yeah, it looked very structured. It looked very, like, nice standard games. Like you said, like, we like those nice standard games. You know, nice 2-3s sort of thing. The defense is like a really interesting one, because I did notice your guys' defense was good, but you didn't use the same defenses that everybody else did. So you're the one team where, you know, we could expect to see somebody in the base. Really, you're the one team that we could expect to see somebody standing in a bit more of an unorthodox spot. And I do remember watching you guys at pre-nats, and it was quite a bit different. You guys had a like super loose defense at pre-nats. I'm not sure if you were practicing attack or seeing what worked, but that was quite a big swap, because we were a little bit more prepared for, oh yeah, I think Aftershock's going to have this great push. And instead you guys had this like fantastic lockdown sort of defense, which I do think tripped people up a little bit the first time they came up against you guy in the base. I don't know, Bootza, I don't know if you have it there how many times we played each other, but I feel like I sat if we played each other more than twice, because I feel like we didn't see you guys.
It says 5 times. It says 5, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, I must have just sat a bunch of the games we played you guys, unfortunately. But yeah, definitely, like, again, it's great to see, you know, again, it's hard not to picture some of you guys as when we first met you when you were a lot younger, you know, Fuggin, especially, I remember in 2015 being like knee height. And now he's running an entire team up to 4th. So yeah, it's really good to see like Adelaide as a whole coming up, and it's really good to see you guys take off from what you did in Darwin. So you guys also proved like it wasn't a fluke. You didn't just magic your way up to 5th in Darwin. You kept going with it and continued to be a really strong team in the competition.
Thank you.
Yeah, so here it is, mate. It's time. It's time to talk about that Golden Game 3. Explain to us all what happened. He's disappeared. He's bailed. The people want to hear what happened. A story of the ages.
Yeah, it was kind of... We haven't spent much time in Golden Games, so I think a lot of like, we had a really bad last, like, we won that first game, which was cool. That was really good, but yeah, the Golden Games afterwards, just like, it felt like we really struggled to get a footing. And so in this last game where it was like, all right, this is like our last chance to get into finals, like, you know, this it's now or never. And then Apex dumped, and we were like, damn, because like I was saying before, like, we really like to play that standard, you know, very clean, normal game. And so I think, you know, we've spoken about it, like we actually had a dinner on the Monday night, and we had a big chat about just everything. We had a few different thoughts on like what we should have done and stuff, but in general, yeah, it was just panic. Yeah, so Apex dumped to us. My thoughts was that we should have crunched with 5 and then defended, but then they pointed out like they're a good team. Like dumping and Bendigo's good. They were probably going to get 5, and then the game would end up at Spartans base, and it was like, okay, well, Spartans would win if the dump, like if it finishes at Spartan's base, like we can't get more bases than them. So we ended up, when they dumped to us, we ended up just doing a base swap, because we were like, well, if they dump to us, it'll end up at Spartans, so this feels like the best option. So we did that, and so we got our cycle on Apex's base, Apex got the cycle on our base, and then we I was sent to Spartan's base to like try and like brick wall there, like keep them busy, keep them stressed out, and potentially like solo a base. Like if I was able to solo it, that would have been the key. Like if we got one base there, like we won the game. But what ended up happening was I was there, I think Fuggen pushed up to try and help me, but Apex ended up doing like a quick thing with like 2 or 3, bam, and they got that one base, and we were like, damn, that was what we were trying to do. And so because they were 1 up, we were like, okay, well, we need to get more. So we ended up committing a little bit more heavily to the Spartans base, which meant Spartans were able to get the red base. And then it was like, damn. But then again, Apex, I believe they were able to get a second base. Like while we were trying to get it, they just popped off. And then they were able to get a second base. And it was like, okay, well, we need to catch up on these bases. So we ended up committing with like 3. We had a bunch of issues where it wasn't communicated very well what was happening, like how we were shifting towards the Spartans base and like why. So not everyone was on the same page. Mikey was still like at red by himself, like trying to hold Spartans out, and then he realizes like, wait, there's literally none of my team here. That was something we identified. It wasn't communicated very well. But yeah, we just keep committing more and more numbers to Spartans base to try and catch up on those bases, those 2 bases Apex got, which meant Spartans were able to get their bases there, and then they had lots of field points, and we ended up just panicking and committed with all 5. So we did get our 10 bases, and then it was just a case of like we weren't able to field point well enough to win the game. So I think just in general, like panic, miscommunications, and then also just Apex getting some like clutch bases like put us in a spot where we were like, this is a really hard decision to make, and you know, it ended up not winning us a game, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, it doesn't happen very often in games where you see a base swap happen, is it? So it's not like you get to practice playing base swaps very often, especially when it's the 3rd golden game. The pressure couldn't be any higher. So panic is probably a natural outcome of being in that situation. Yeah. So what do you feel like? What do you guys feel like is the next stage for you guys? What have you learnt from this year that you're going to take into next year to help you try and break through, get that elusive final spot?
Yeah, I think it was just to, you know, keep tightening everything up. We had a chat on Monday about like what's like something that like we felt we were lacking, like as individuals. Like what did you feel like you need to improve on so that we can be the best team we can be next nationals? So we all went around the table and kind of said some stuff. So team wise, I feel like our synergies and our structures and our comms and stuff was like, it was really good, but it wasn't perfect. It never will be perfect. So we're going to keep trying to, like you were saying in that, I think it was the first video, like, tag is like, well, getting good at anything is about collecting all like these little 1%ers, and then eventually you get to a point where like you've got, you know, quite a lot of them, and then you start winning lots of games.
Million
so,
of them.
Yeah, that would be nice. Catalyst aren't sharing them around, but yeah, just keep collecting those like 1%ers, like making less and less mistakes, striving to achieve those individual goals. I guess a little bit of honesty from me is, so I know for me, I've always put quite a lot of pressure on myself to perform, and especially when it comes time, when I'm like, alright, it's now or never. As soon as I start saying stuff like that, I instantly just like, I'm a much worse player than I would be if that wasn't what was going through my head. I feel like it's a pretty common phenomenon for like athletes and stuff, just at a high level. So I know, you know, if there's anyone out there that's struggling with this, You're not alone. It's a massive thing that I struggle with every year, and like in anything I do, as soon as it becomes super important to me, and it's like the now or never stage, being able to still perform at the highest level that I know I can. So yeah, in general, there was a little bit of that kind of stuff going around the table. In a bit of news, so Dossie's actually taking a year off. He's going to be going traveling around Australia with his missus, going around in like a little van that they've modded out. So we're going to be real sad to not have Dossie with us. He's just been...
Who's going to captain your team?
Yeah, right? Yeah, it might be Chach. Chach will captain next year. Yeah. So when we had a discussion about what we want to do. Obviously, like playing with 5 is not good. Like just us 1-up in 2015. But yeah, it's a bit early to say, I guess. Like Syrex was saying before, like now we have team slots are probably going to be in effect, so we won't be able to send everyone that we want. So, teams will have to pick and choose their rosters a bit. The other teams in Adelaide might all drastically change. So we're not sure who we're going to pick up. We've got our eyes on a couple people. But yeah, in general, just, keep striving towards those personal goals. Make every training a productive training. That was kind of a point I made during our chat, is if we ever have a training where it gets to the end of the night and we don't know what we improved on, then it was a wasted training in my mind. So yeah, just gotta stay super disciplined and stay on top of it, and yeah, make a push for that top 3 sweet spot.
I think if I could provide any help to you with that dilemma, mate, the training piece is so important to the mindset piece when you actually get to that point where this is the game, this is the one that matters, this is going to get us through the grand final. Or if you get into the grand final, okay, 2 games down, we're still in it here, we just need 1 good game. The ability to go in and perform at that point, really, especially, given that Nats is such a marathon and there's usually a lot of exhaustion and everything going with that, knowing that you've put the time into your training makes a massive difference, because you've done the hard work and that you deserve it. I feel like that's a big part of helping resolve that. But yeah, you guys will be back, no doubt. Let's see what happens in Tassie, but I've got full confidence that you guys will be competing around that area of the ladder again. And Syrex, have you got anything for Holmes in terms of what you saw from Aftershock and how they're going to get to the next level?
Maybe settle on a captain might help. If I'm being honest, like the biggest thing I saw is the thing that's the hardest to do, and that's getting that experience in those golden games, because they're a whole new ball game. They're a completely different sort of thing. It's almost like a logarithmic scale where grand finals is here and golden games are here, and then there's just system D, and you only get 1 potential opportunity a year to practice for a golden game. So it's and yet when you get seasoned teams in there, you look at Catalyst, you look at Spartans, they've got players that have done this before. I think it does actually make all the difference. So, more high-level games obviously is always the most beneficial. It's great that Adelaide has multiple teams that can hold their own now. And hopefully now that, things are opening back up, we'll have more high-end sort of pre-nats and interstate comps and traveling and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I would just say, the biggest thing is, more experience in golden games, high-level games, and things like that, and I think it's really hard to describe to anybody who's never been in one of those games, and I've never actually been in a nationals golden game, but even the atmosphere, the gameplay, everything is totally different, and you don't know it till you know it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's so true. There's a subtle accumulation of micro skills at each little level of the ladder, and you just until you've been there, you don't get to really experience that. But you guys have now 3 times, so no doubt that'll hold you in good stead for the future, mate. And best of luck to everybody on Aftershock as they return next year for another crack at the title. I think it's time to move on now. We're going to move on to our 3 finalists. So we have in 3rd place overall, they came in after System D in 5th. Sorry, after Cascade 2 in 5th. They were sync listed at 5th. the Eclipse from Brisbane, who finished third. We had Taipan, Orcarai, Adam, Master Mopar, Lilbo, and Robo. They did go up and down throughout the week. They never beat Adrenaline, funnily enough. That's the one team they didn't beat.
They're the boys.
But they were between third and fifth all week. They had 3 wins and a third in System D. They got the win in the most important game, though, that mattered. That got them through. So they came through in the second golden game. And then they finished the grand final with a first, a second, and a third, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a little. Just about how that played out. But just in terms of, just broadly speaking, how they performed at the competition, Syrex, what did you see from Eclipse, and how did you think they went overall?
I think I always expected Eclipse to be probably about where they were. So I thought fifth was on the lower end of where they would finish up, just knowing them at home, playing against them at home. I think they're probably the Queensland team with the most training time together. So like as a team, they had the most time to work on that synergy and to work on all that time together. I don't think the maze suited them. So I was a little worried there. Like I think they would have done better in a more traditional style maze like we have in Queensland, like Darwin or like Hobart would have been, but they definitely adapted well. I think Taipan did a really good job at sort of like keeping his brigade together even when things weren't working. So they definitely had some games that they dropped that would have been a little bit shaky because it took them some time to work out their defense especially, but even almost everything they had to readapt from their specific playstyle. With the maze being so open, not having a last line, they definitely struggled a little bit at the beginning. But I think they worked it out over the course of the comp, obviously, because, they made it into grand finals. So Taipan did a great job at keeping that all together. I think having multiple people who could really think about the game helped. So they had Mopar, who's obviously been the captain of Blue Steel for years. They had Taipan, who could run games. And then they had Robo, who's also, been a good thinker on the team, which allowed everybody to sort of, do what they do best. Adam probably had the least amount of time with them, but obviously Adam's a seasoned player. He's got the reach. He does pretty well in general on whatever team he's on. And it was Lilbo's first nats, and he had like a stellar first nationals. I think the last time we saw a rookie come third was when the Wolfpack debuted in 2016. So, he did fantastic. I think they did a lot to overcome quite a bit of adversity this nats, because this maze was less than ideal for how they play, but they worked it out and they sort of overcome everything around them. Interestingly, I think they were the Queensland team that didn't like to play red base. So the rest of us all really loved red base, and they seemed to hate it. And I think that actually worked out for them because the meta shifted towards the end of the comp where red was no longer the strongest base. I think it started as it, but they preferred blue and green, and that ended up being the strongest base towards the end. So I think that definitely worked out really well for them.
Yeah, and what you were saying about overcoming adversity, like I think that was encapsulated in the grand final. In that first game, they got smashed. They come out with 17,000, just under 18k. They were 10k off second place. They were so far behind. It looked like it had the hallmarks of a just happy to be here performance. But then the second game they pulled out of first place and got themselves right back into it. They were only then 4k off second and 5k off first at that point. So yeah, hats off to Taipan for being able to get the team after you so know that you've been smashed when you come out with 18k in a grand final game, and he would have had to keep all his troops heads together and then craft a strategy, go into the next game to get them up to for a big performance, which they did. So that was really impressive. Holmes, what did you see from Eclipse? What was? Let's have a look here. Actually, you guys played them quite a bit, did you?
Yeah, I'd say like 3 or 4 times, maybe more.
5, according to Doug's site.
Yeah, that checks out. Yeah, just a team of, every player in that team can very much hold their own. So coming up against them in any game is like, you're not comfy. You're not like, oh yeah, this is, it's they're kind of scary to come up against. But yeah, just on kind of what Syrex was saying about how the meta shifted and like blue and green becoming better on the last day. So we actually versed them in our first game in System D, and they ended up with red, and we were green, and we smashed them. And then that was the only time we beat them the whole comp, actually. But then we ended up versing them in the second golden game again, and they ended up on blue. And yeah, it was super hard to deal with their blue defense. A lot of the time, our win condition ended up being like if we can get an early base or two, we would like feel pretty good about the game. But you know, I ended up going to blue base, and there it was Mopar in by the ramp, Orcarai on the L, and we had Lil Bo in that sweep corridor on the back door. And yeah, I think Lil Bo put me through a reload like 3 times, if not more. Probably more. Literally, probably more. Lil Bo did a really good job of locking down that corridor, and I just couldn't deal with them. So massive kudos to them.
If you finish that game on the same basis and they beat you by 9k or 8 and a bit k, 8.5k, that's ridiculous amount of field points to be behind them.
That was all the points that I gave them.
Well done, Home. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, guys. You know, you can thank me later. Yeah, so no, that definitely checks out that they preferred blue, because when they ended up getting blue, they smoked us. So otherwise, yeah, they just played like a, you know, relatively standard game, I guess. You know, Taipan going out looking for opportunities, taking I saw a bunch of like different iterations of like who they took out first, but I guess in general it was probably Adam going out first for the most part.
I think it was actually Mopar.
Was it?
He was a lot of Mopar.
Okay. Yeah, cool. That being said, yeah, I don't really remember, despite versing them 5 times. You'd hope I would. Yeah, no, just played a good standard game. Their defense ended up being really difficult to deal with. And yeah, they've got some strong attackers, and they were able to smash some bases. So yeah, massive kudos to them.
I actually didn't think they were actually going to finish in the finals after seeing I wasn't there, of course, but seeing what was happening in the Cascades in terms of their consistency. I was quite concerned. I was like, are they going to have the consistency of performances to be able to you got to string together victories essentially to, you know, move up the ladder, win a golden game, get into finals and do some damage. And I just wasn't seeing that. But what they did on the final day was pretty remarkable, really. And to get themselves back into the game, like we said in that game too, was phenomenal. So really, they ended up, where did they finish? They finished 5,300 behind Catalyst over 3 games. So basically two bases over 3 games, and they were just under a base. A base behind second.
No, they were way closer than that. There was only like 1,800 points between first and third by the end.
Oh, that's average. Yeah, so I was talking total.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, so like across the 3 games, a total of like not even 2 bases separated them essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you look at that and you go, well, there's probably not a huge amount you could critique them on, but there's got to be improvement. I mean, they've got Lil Bo, who's in his first year. They had trained together quite a lot, but not so much with Adam, I don't think. So they weren't all there throughout the year in their trainings. So where do you guys see them improving? Where's their improvement going to come from?
You can go first, sorry.
Lauren, do you want to go first?
I'm just looking at some stats real fast. I do think, so while the teams had a lot of time together, this is another team that has probably suffered from a lack of time in that top 5 sort of position at Nationals. Like I think Taipan, the best he's come before this year was 11th, something like that. You know, we've seen Orcarai up there, we've seen Mopar and Adam up there, but they haven't spent as much time in those top 5 sort of games as you would see the Spartans or Catalyst. Actually, I'll take that back on Spartans this year, but yeah, Catalyst especially. Yeah, so this team is probably just lacking a little bit in that top 5 sort of experience. And I think this team, there's a big difference between managing a comp and dominating a comp. And I think this team was like the perfect, balance of, they weren't just managing this comp, they were learning from every game and utilizing this comp. So it wasn't just that they took a game off of somebody and happened to scrap through a golden game. They actually performed in the grand final, and you're right, they didn't look like they're happy to be their team. I think that it was tough having to play their worst base in the first game of the grand final. You don't tend to want that because that's a real, tough on morale, and you don't want to be clawing your way back after one game of the grand final, but they definitely did. And I think it probably helped a bit that the two teams they were playing were two teams they play a lot. These are tough teams, but I do think there's a little bit of comfort in playing teams that you have been around a lot and you feel comfortable with, and you feel less likely to get thrown a curveball. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they took from that. They took from what experience they did have, and from their captain, and obviously picked themselves back up to have ripper of a second game, and pretty much almost claw their way back. I know there was when grand finals are that close, there's 100 different things that happen in any game that could have swung it. But I do know there was a pretty bad team deny on Taipan in game 3 that they're pretty not happy with, because apparently, I spoke to Mopar about it later, he was so upset with himself that it probably took him out of the game for 10 seconds. The other team rocked back up and they lost that opportunity for the base as well.
Yeah.
And so, little things like that swing games so much. If you had something like that happen in the first game or even the second, it's so easy to get that in your head. So honestly, kudos to these guys for not getting down on that first game, because I think we see it quite a bit in these grand final series, where if a team really drops the ball in the first game or even the second, it's kind of game over for them from there.
Yeah. Did you know which game the team tonight happened in?
It was game 3.
It was game 3.
Yeah.
Okay. So they didn't have to get through any more games. He just had to get through the rest of that game.
It was the funniest thing too, because I saw it on the cameras and Mopar didn't know at the time. Mopar was getting called out to be a third. So Taipan shooting the base, Adam was on the back door looking through alive, and saw Mopar running in, oh cool, he's here to help us. And Adam definitely could have shot Mopar. When you see that look in a man's eyes, you shoot him no matter what. So it was just an unfortunate incident. But like I said, 101 different things could have won or lost that series on any team. So you can't just focus on that one particular thing that happened. But I think it was just the most prominent thing, because, as an audience watching this grand finals, a team deny is one of the most entertaining things that you can probably see.
It's so true. It's one of those things. It's easy to relate the team deny and the result, but the reality, you're exactly right. The result was made up of thousands of activities that happened during the game. So, yeah, in no way should that be something that he should linger on for too long.
And it's one of those things, as bad it is to have something like that happen in a grand final, that's something you never forget. That's something you will never remove from your mind, and it's something you will always be wary of. So it's almost the best learning tool you could ever have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Holmes, any advice for Eclipse?
Yeah. Not really. I mean, it's hard because they smoked us most of the time, so it's I don't know. They seem like the perfect team to me. But yeah, just to carry on with what you guys were kind of saying is so Aftershock's actually been in 4 golden games. So we were in one in Darwin, and on the point of trying people pinpointing one thing that happened, it was oh, if I hadn't done this, then we would have won the game, or if I did do this, we would have won the game. But you'll find if you go around and you collect all of those oh, if I had just things, everyone will have one. So yeah, whilst it's easy to kind of pinpoint it on one thing, the reality is there's so many of those things that happen in a game. So it happening in the 3rd game was probably a fortunate thing. If it happened in the 1st game, it is really hard to overcome that mental thing of I've just lost us this grand final because I got a team deny. But yeah, it's very rarely, it's just not a good thing mental wise to like pin something on like, oh, if I had done this one thing, we would have won, because it's something that it's super easy to carry with you in future games and stuff.
One of the biggest things that they do now in professional sports is training people how to move on from mistakes. It's one of the most important characteristics you can have as a professional athlete, essentially, because the only way you can actually perform at the peak level and get to those really high level of flow states is to be able to make a mistake and actually move straight on from it immediately and not linger on it. So it's one of those things that you just have to do. You can't, and I say to players at the league and things like that, if you're not getting denied at least 500 points every game or two, you're probably not taking enough risks. Like it's a game of risk and return. So naturally, you're going to make mistakes and things are going to happen. Hopefully Mopar can move on from that, and it'll be interesting to see if I think they are going to stick together. My understanding is the Eclipse guys will stick together. They might change their combination a little bit. And with another year of training under the belt, especially for Lilbo, he's the most inexperienced player on that team. He's training hard. He's already back into his training, so he's going to be right up there again next year. Yeah, I expect these guys, if they stick together, to be to continue on their merry way.
My understanding is that Adam is like moving to Canada or something like that. He's doing an exchange program, so he won't be at Hobart. I think they're already looking at picking up Blitz.
Wow, that'll be a decent pickup. Maroons' best player in Rumble.
Yeah, true. I forgot about that. That's funny.
All right. Well, Eclipse, good luck to you guys. Looking forward to training against you guys all this year. And you guys, no doubt you'll be up there again next year. Let's move on to the Spartans now. We're into our top two. So Spartans, there was probably a clear difference between the rest of the competition and then Spartans and Catalyst in terms of how things finished throughout the week. They basically swapped first and second place throughout the week. I think Spartans were in first place for most of the week. They were in first place.
Yeah, they were first place the whole week. Until after
week.
finals.
Until after finals. So there you go. They were sync listed at second. Spartans is made up of Mad Cans, Potato, Peregrine, Link, The Leg, and Zeropa. They were the best team. Spartans were the best team throughout the comp. They just couldn't quite get the job done in finals. They ended up with a first and 2 seconds in System D, so they did have to go through to the third golden game after getting themselves 3 chances, and then got them through on that crazy base swap game. And they had 1 win and 2/3 in the grand final. And they had 4 of their players finish on A grade and 2 on double B. So they had a real consistent showing in terms of, how deep they bat on their team. They bat pretty deep. So I'll start with you, Syrex. You know these guys inside out because you train with them all the time. What can you tell us about the Spartans? And I mean, they did so much well. So firstly, tell us about what they did well.
I think they're a tough team to talk about because, they're obviously disappointed with the second. And I think they did so much good to do as well as they did on the whole comp. Like, I think any hurdle you could throw at a team was thrown at this team this year. Like, they went through 2 reforms, I think, between Rumble and now. A lot of their players were picked up so they took Leg from Storm. Peregrine was originally on Storm and then moved up to Spartans in that double reform through the year. They had Stingray on their team up until I think 5 weeks before Nats, when he couldn't get time off work and Link was yanked out of retirement in that time. So I think Link was playing for about 5 weeks leading up to the actual comp, and I don't think we got much. I think he did 2 actual team training sessions in that time was all we got in, other than drills and things like that. So obviously he was fresh. Obviously you've got Cans and Potato and Zeropa, who've been staples of the Spartans since 2020. Look, I think it's going to be really rough on these guys because I think they did almost everything right, and it just didn't play out the correct, how they would have wanted it to. if you look at the actual, like, it was a base that separated first and second in the grand finals, and they actually lost Potato Golden Game 1. So Potato tore his quad in Golden Game 1, like halfway through the game. So Potato didn't play again after that. And it's funny because the Spartans is such a well-known team, but only 2 of their players in grand finals had ever played a grand finals before.
Really? So that was only Cans and Potato?
No, so Potato was injured. It was Link, yeah.
Link, yeah.
So Zeropa's never played a grand finals. And Leg and Peregrine have never played in the top 10 before.
Right. So Zeropa wasn't on the 2019 team?
No, he was on Stealth with me that year. It was his first year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think, yeah, it's really easy to forget that, you know, a lot of these guys haven't been playing high level for very long. Like Leg's debut in the top 10 was Rumble with Storm, and Peregrine, having moved up from New South Wales, had never played in the top 10 before.
The loss of Potato would have been significant because no doubt they probably would have had a combination for each colour. Is that fair to say? They would have had their 5 players that were playing on red, their 5 on blue, their 5 on green.
I'm not 100%, but I'm 99% sure that Potato wouldn't have been sat in the grand finals if he could play. Like, he's you know, Cans and Potato are the 2 longest standing Spartans members. They've played together the most, and I do think Cans relies on Potato quite a bit for various things within the team. And I do think when you actually watch the grand finals, one of the biggest things that sets apart Catalyst from Spartans is you can see a little bit of green coming through on their players. You know, Catalyst, almost all their players looked quite set in a grand finals. Like, they knew what they were doing. They've been there before. Obviously, they did have Volley and Dodge who were new to it. But when, you know, League has been playing for a long time and they have 3 players that have never been in a grand final before, you could just see those little things that do separate teams quite a bit. That being said, a base is nothing. There's that age-old 100 different things could have changed the game. I know Leg is kicking himself because he had an opportunity to take red in the first game, thought that it was like, looked at the phaser, thought he didn't have enough time, but it, you know, how the phaser can be a bit off. And so he thought he had 2 seconds and there was 7 seconds, and he actually, like, really could have got the base, and, you know, that's annoying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think these guys, like I said before, they didn't manage this comp. They dominated this comp, and it just unfortunately didn't go well come finals day.
Yeah, and is there a bit of a story about that last base destroy that Dodge got as well?
Well, I think it's again, it's one of those most noticeable things, but it seemed to be this chain reaction of, you know, Eclipse dumped, someone saw Dodge, just Volley sent Dodge to go get the empty, Adam followed Dodge, Volley followed Adam, somebody else followed Volley, and this chain reaction, it ended up being, you know, completely 50-50 whether or not Dodge got it. I'm pretty sure it was in the last 10 seconds of the third game, and that, you know, again, technically was the decider, but so was everything else that went down in the game.
Yeah.
Again, it's that extra gear that people go into in these grand finals. Firebird was reffing, and he came out of, you know, the finals and went, I saw Wax do some stuff I've never seen before. And yeah, I think when you have that much experience in a grand final series, it is what can separate 2 teams. That being said, like, Eclipse and Spartans both had a chance to take that grand final series. It just didn't go that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know firsthand playing teams in their first final series. I mean, that's the only way we could beat Wolfpack in the early years, is because their pack work was, you know, a couple of percent not quite what it was in the previous tournament, just because of the nerves and things that were coming through, you know, in those early days in 2016. And that's how we were able to sort of stay on top of them in the grand final for like 1 or 2 years. Just got over them in Adelaide, essentially. But as their experience developed, and then all of that went away, and look at them now. Obviously, they've got that much experience now. Their game doesn't, you know, they don't get more nervous in the grand final. They probably get less nervous, and they go to another level, and they start unlocking skills that they don't always pull out. So. Yeah, Holmes, have you got anything to add about the Spartans? What was it like playing the Spartans?
Yeah, like, I've kind of been saying how, like, you know, this team was really good, went into the game, and it's like, you know, you can never, like, you know, be like, oh, we could, we can win this game. Every game against the Spartans was like the hardest game ever. They're just such they're especially like all throughout the comp, they were just such an insurmountable force. I think we only ended up taking one game off of them the whole time, and even then, like, we didn't win the game. Like, we got second and they got third, and that was in a Catalyst game, which, yeah, that was the only time we scalped them, if you can call it that. Like, it wasn't even a very convincing, like, beating on them either. Yeah, just, I don't know. Madcans runs a bloody tight ship, is all you can say. We've been saying how, the pressure getting to players that haven't necessarily been at that top end, but like, Spartans were here proving like you can still be in the top end and like make it to a finals and get second. Like, obviously they'd be disappointed they didn't, but the fact that they can have players that haven't even played in the top tier before and get a second is like, it's yeah, you have to give credit where credit's due. Madcans runs a bloody tight ship, and yeah, it's crazy stuff. It always felt like anything you threw at them, they had an answer for it. When they were losing, they had a way of clawing back. If they were winning, they have a way of like just like stomping you into the ground and like, you're not getting close to me right now. So yeah, just well done. I mean, they beat us in the last Golden game, so I don't really know what else I can say.
Yeah. Well, one thing I know from playing Spartans locally and also playing with and on teams with Madcans, I do consider Madcans probably the best captain that I've ever played with, or even played against. Like, he's just so thoroughly well prepared. When we first said to him, it was before Worlds 2014. I was like, okay, you're going to captain this comp, mate. And he's like, oh my god, are you sure? And he thought about every single scenario. This is before he'd actually proven himself as a captain and everything like that. He just thought about every single scenario 100 times over, and he was so concerned about whether he was going to do a good job. He just put in a huge amount of effort, and it was pretty clear to us early on that he was going to be like a natural for that role. And yeah, that's what he's proven. And the only thing he hasn't done is just get over the line. Essentially, 2019 he was basically there again. It was the smallest margin in history. And then Darwin happened. They just missed out on the final there. And then this year again. So, and then at the Rumble too, they were leading after 4 games. There was a 6-game grand final. I'm pretty sure they were leading after 4 games, and they just couldn't quite get over the line there as well. So, the only thing Cairns hasn't done yet is just get over the line in that last game or two. I mean, in Bendigo, they were 57.5k, and Catalyst were 58-1. So there was 500 points behind Catalyst going into the last game. So it was still anybody's game. They just couldn't quite get the job done. So yeah, and like you were saying earlier, Lauren, it can be the tiniest little thing. There's 1,000 things that happen in a game that make up a base difference, and that's the thing that we're talking about. Teams that are all so highly skilled and so close in their level that it comes down to tiny little instances that happen in game. So. Yeah. Is there any talk about the Spartans changing their roster that you know of, Lauren, for next year?
I think they're still in discussion. Like, Potato's been out with an injury up until I think last Sunday was the first time he's played since we got back. I don't think anything's set in stone. I know Peregrine's keen. I know Cairns is keen. I think there's a couple of discussions on who can get leave, things like that. I think Link is keen to stick around, which would be good. And then, there's always the question of, can Stingray come back and how will that look? So I think we'll see some version of them. It might look a little bit different, but like the core of it will still be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. For any young teams out there, if you want to if you really want to model just strategically how to prepare for a tournament, Cairns just leaves no stone unturned. He's such a professional leader of his team. It's a great person to watch and follow. So is there any closing words on Spartans, guys? I know it is difficult because second place is such an amazing thing, but for them it was a disappointment. Is there any final closing comments around the Spartans?
I guess I have a little bit. So, in general, the Spartans, like, in 2020 and in this year, we've really struggled when we come up against them. But we have beaten them a couple times. We did at least once during this comp, but we also beat them once, like, in pre-nuts as well. And, kind of to go on with what you were saying before, Bootza, about, like, a whole thing with, like, professional athletes nowadays is, like, learning how to, like, leave your mistakes that happen in a game, like, in the past, and, like, keep going as if they didn't even happen, kind of thing, at least in terms of, like, how it affects your mental state. The few games we did beat them, I saw quite a lot of, like, between the players, just, like, a little bit, I guess you could call it bickering, you know, a little bit of, like, franticness and chaos, and, you know, people getting a bit upset and stuff, which obviously it's a million times easier said than done. But I didn't really pay enough attention to the grand final. Obviously I wasn't in there and I didn't ref, but I wonder if there was any of those moments during the game where people started getting, you know, maybe a mistake or two was made and it weighed on their conscience just for a little bit longer than it probably should have, and maybe it resulted in one of those 1,000 things that could have been the difference of a base. So yeah, that's the only thing I've ever seen where I've been like, I feel like that needs to be like that they could improve on. That is just yeah, their ability to keep their cool when things do start going really wrong. Obviously, like, but they, you know, it doesn't happen all the time, right? Like, they have games where they are losing and they make good decisions and they claw back and then bam, they're winning the game again. But like we keep saying, the best teams are the ones that make less and less mistakes. So it is a mistake, you know, getting a bit heated, you know, losing your focus, maybe like bickering with your teammates a bit. It is a mistake. So if they can make that less, then, you know, maybe that'll be the difference, and next year we'll see them taking that gold. So
yeah, Cairns is the most competitive person I've ever met before, and that is his greatest strength and potentially his greatest weakness as well, because as a strength he leaves no stone unturned. He's a complete competitor, never gives up. But then there's the times where if things don't go right, if there's a crack, or if you crack at a teammate or something like that, that has a ripple effect on the team, and it can sometimes affect performance. So I don't know. I wasn't inside the Spartans team or anything like that. I don't know what happened. Only those guys know what happened. But that would be the only thing that I see from Kansas leadership as an outsider that, you know, is a small chink in the armor, and it is with everybody. Their greatest strength is always their greatest weakness as well. So, Syrex, have you got anything to add on the Spartans before we move on to the next team?
No, I think we've covered most of it. I think it'd be interesting to see what they can do with some more time together, if they stay together. Yeah,
absolutely. All right. Well, no doubt they'll be back. They can't possibly hang up the boots without the victory yet. So, good luck in your training this year, everybody from the Spartans. I look forward to training against you and seeing how you perform again in the coming tournaments. Let's move on to our winners. We made it. Our first place getters, Catalyst, were essentially in second all week. It was an unfamiliar position for them, really. I mean, for the last few years, they've been pretty dominant, and particularly in Albury, they were the number one team. And we're talking Wolfpack, of course, here. Now converted to Catalyst with a bit of a list change. But this was different for them. They had to actually. You know, they weren't the best team all week, and they had to go to school, and they had to learn the things that they needed to learn, and the lessons they needed to learn. They had to peak at the right time, and that's essentially what happened. They were the first through. They got through in Golden Game 1, just over the line from memory. They got
Spartans and us.
2K.
Yeah, it was nothing between all three teams, apparently, essentially. Then they went on to, they got a win and 2 seconds in the grand final, which was enough for them to secure the victory. And, well, the only team that I can see that had 2 AAA players as well, Husky and Wax, and I think Husky well and truly proved that he can play outside of a base. In this tournament, finishing with I think it was 165% tag ratio or something, and he doesn't even have a base to hide inside. Is just next level phenomenal. So yeah, Holmes, do you want to start us on Catalyst? What did you see from them? How was their journey through the week? And yeah, why did they suddenly peak at the right time?
Yeah, so Catalyst we came up against like quite a lot during the comp. Probably, I wouldn't. You have to fact check it, but I'm pretty sure we versed them the most out of the teams in like the top 5 at least.
So you versed them 5 times.
Okay, same as Spartans then. It felt like we versed them a lot more, but anyway, it was a team. Obviously, you know, they're 4-time champs now. Like you can't. It's really, well, I was saying before, like, you know, just go into a game and like, you know, just like, you know, they're blank faces with packs on, but it's like these guys have won like 4 nationals. It's pretty hard to like get past that. So, but in spite of that, every game we played against them was like really, really, really fun laser tag. All of them, like, you know, they're just like really cool dudes, inside and outside of the arena. I specifically remember a game against them where, you know, there was a bit of like smack talk, but it was like very, very healthy smack talk. You know, it was, you know, hyping your teams up, and then like, you know, you get, you know, Aftershock goes and gets their base, and we're hyping each other up, and then they come and they like immediately get our ones, and they're like, you know, smack talking about it and stuff. Super, super fun to play against. All really great dudes. Anyone that's spoken to them knows that's the case. And yeah, just like always, they play like a, you know, like nothing, I wouldn't say it's anything super crazy, just a really, really, really strong standard game. The defense super, super hard to deal with. And their attack is just a force to be reckoned with. I personally spent quite a lot of time at Catalyst Space. So they, a lot of the time, had Wham Fox on the back door. They had Husky in the L, and then they had some combination of like the other players filling like that third defensive spot, and quite often they actually had 4 there as well. Wham Fox on the back door was just so hard to get anything more than a double against. For those that weren't there, for a lot of people, the attacking strategy was to win your duel on the back door and get in the base, and that was kind of like, that was step 1. But with Wham Fox and that back door, it was just so difficult to win that duel, like, you know. And he's really smart about his reloads and stuff as well. Like, I remember trying to do stuff like wearing down his reloads and then going to reload, but he would always come with me and stuff, even if I was doubling with him. Just, it was so difficult to get past that first step. And then even when you do, you've got Husky waiting for you on the other side of the base on the L, shooting through with his bloody go-go gadget arms. So yeah, it was quite a good combo between, I would say most of the defense was in that intersection between like Wham Fox in the back door and Husky on the L, and then on top of that there's just a third or a fourth person also there. So yeah, big kudos to them. And then yeah, Grub definitely like so obviously for like the Wolfpack we had Lakio was the captain, in-game leader, lead attacker for the last 3 years, and no, he's not playing. One of these boys had to step up, and Grub has more than risen to the occasion. I've always kind of thought that Grub was like secretly like, you know, they're like one of their best players, if not the best player, but he's a little bit more reserved compared to like Wax specifically. And so he doesn't get as much, he didn't get as much of the shine previously. But he's more than proven himself, and he's very much in the spotlight now. So yeah, massive kudos to Grub for, you know, and like, not to mention like the amount of pressure, you know, it's I've heard a quote before where it's easy to win a championship, but it's harder to retain a championship. Obviously it's not easy to win, but that's the quote. And to have the pressure of like, and the legacy that Wolfpack has of winning the previous 3 nationals, there's been a roster change. All right, now it's like in your hands, Grub. You're the new captain, in-game leader. Like, you know, you better perform. That would be like an enormous amount of pressure, even in spite of like how much finals experience he has. And that would make that would make lesser people crumble. But Grub's proven himself to be just a astounding player. So massive kudos to him, and he will forever be my boogeyman player. That no matter when I come against him, it's like a foregone conclusion that I've lost this duel. Yeah.
Might want to look at that, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my problem. I gotta deal with that.
No joking. No, it's for me. It feels like it's like their most impressive victory of the four of them, just because of all the circumstances that you spoke about. No Payne, no Lakio. Got two brand new players on the team. Different captain. And I also had a lot of faith in Grub after seeing what he did. I think it was pre-Nats Sunshine Coast with the ragtag team from WA and etc. And he proved himself that he can definitely run a team. What did you think, Lauren? Did you think what was it like playing Catalyst? How were they different to perhaps playing Wolfpack in the past? Was there a difference, or did they play a pretty similar style?
I think that they played fairly the same. I wouldn't, obviously it's hard for Husky's normally in the base, and you are used to having your Lakio or your Payne, but honestly they felt just as strong as they ever have. And honestly, I'm so proud of all of them, because every single player had to step up this year in their own way. Grub had to captain. Wham could no longer just be that last defensive player. He's got younger players on the team now. He's got to step up and work with them. We haven't, like, for those of us at home, we haven't seen Wax around a hell of a lot this year, but he came back as strong as ever. I actually think Wax is probably one of the best technical players of like my generation. Like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find another player whose technical skills are as good as Wax's. And Wax holds himself to a very high standard. I know he was getting upset in side events because he's only getting seconds and things like that. And I think that actually attributes to his, and that's the thing, like, we all do that, like, oh, I'd be stoked with second, but Wax isn't, and that's what makes Wax. That's what makes him so good. I know Husky was having some issues early in the week because, he was upset that there wasn't a great last line spot, and he had to, but they overcame all of this stuff, obviously, to go ahead and win it. I know Volley, because, Volley was a new addition to the team. Similar story to Peregrine and Firebird. Never played in the top 10 before, never played in these sorts of games, put a lot of pressure on himself, I know, at the beginning to perform, but I think he fit in just as well as anybody else in this team. And honestly, I think, the highlight of this team for me this year was Dodge. I've never seen such a big jump in skill level between years until now with Dodge, because, I played with him in 2020. He was still quite a bit younger and smaller back then, and then he played on the Hornets at Rumble, and I remember the Wolfpack picking him up, and honestly going, in my head, I thought it was an interesting pick. Like, I thought he deserved it for sure, but I wasn't sure if they were doing a development team or what. And then I think I saw him play about 3-4 months later, and this was a different kid. Like, this kid could play now. This was a top 5 player all of a sudden, and I think that is a tribute to Grub to be able to take a player to that level so quickly. And obviously Dodge put in a ton of work, and so did Volley. So every member of this team had to step up and do something new and go out of their comfort zone, and they all did at the right time.
Yeah, talk about the pressure that Grub had on his shoulders of like taking on the leadership from Lakio. Like, the amount of pressure that would have had to have been on the shoulders of Volley and Dodge to try and live up to this legacy of one of the greatest of all time Australian teams we've ever seen. And yeah, they seemed like they fit in as if they were there the whole time. So yeah, really big kudos to them.
Totally. How were they playing Volley and Dodge? What roles did they play them in?
So both of them were kind of mid almost. So I think Volley played maybe a bit more second D to mid, and Dodge played a lot of first out to mid. So I think the strongest combination was Wax went out first. But they did practice a lot of Dodge out first, Dodge out second.
Yeah, right. So they had important roles on the team. They were being utilised in attack in the early parts of the game.
So. They were equal members of the team. They weren't hidden and they weren't coddled. They were pillars of that team.
Yep. Yeah, just to speak to what you were saying about Wax as well, like if Wax trained hard, it is scary what he would be capable of. Because in the early days, there was always a lot of conjecture. Okay, which one of these Wolfpack players is going to become the top player? And there was always like, is it going to be Wax? Is it going to be Husky? That was, a big part of the discussions. And in the early days, I thought it was going to be Wax because he's, like what you were saying, his technical skills were so unique. Like the things he does, and he still to this day does things in games I haven't seen before. He would just put something out.
I watched him fold himself into a pretzel in the middle of a base and take it up with 5 people, I swear.
Yeah. That kind of stuff, and it's just like he's just got such a unique body shape, and he's so tall and he's so lanky, and he's so skilled with how he uses the phaser in his hands and everything. Like it's so unique. I really would love to see him do a full year of training and see what would come out the other end. Is there any discussions yet from these guys about their team for next year? I think there may be some roster changes coming up for Catalyst.
So the only thing I've heard is Husky is unsure if he will be able to get the time off, because I know he's working in the healthcare sector now, and obviously that's a difficult sector to be working in for the time being. And I know Wax is having his usual existential crisis that he has after Nationals, where I believe going into Nats, he promised himself he wasn't going to Hobart, like he was going to call it. And then I think he had a fantastic time and remembered that he likes to play laser tag. And so yes, I believe Wax is having an existential crisis. I think he's doing the smart thing. He's going to wait for the Nats hype to wear off, and see how he feels in a couple of months.
Yeah. Well, we know we're going to get some of those guys back, and we know now that doesn't matter who they recruit onto their team, they're going to give them, pretty elite level training. So they'll be back up there this next year. Is there any chinks in their armor? Is there anything that they can improve, do you think? Holmes, would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, it's just such a how can you come up with anything for these guys, right? Because the things I noticed were things that I only noticed in hindsight that I didn't capitalize on in the moment. So it was I don't know if I should really say it anyway. Does it count if I didn't capitalize on it in the moment, if I only noticed it in hindsight? I'll say it anyway, otherwise we'll be starved for things to say. But I just noticed when I was there, obviously I spent quite a lot of time at Wolfpack's base. I would start off trying to deal with Wham, and then what was happening quite often is Husky was moving in a position where he could help Wham to win the duel, which was good when I was just me there. But in hindsight, I was talking to Fuggen, who was towards the end of the comp, we were doing a strat where I would brick wall at a base, so I'd be there by myself to put pressure on them so they can't field point as aggressively. And there's always the chance I solo the base, and then Fuggen would rock up at random times. What we realized is he kept coming to the base from the exact same spot, and so they were kind of ready for him every time. In hindsight, if he'd come from this other this other pathway, if we timed it right, we would have been able to catch out the overextension by Husky, and thus could have resulted in a bunch of bases and stuff. But yeah, it was something that I'm beating myself up on, that I definitely saw it happening in the game, but I just didn't think to relay it to Sean, to Fuggen. But yeah, it's that, and that's something that's a little bit May specific as well. I haven't versed Wolfpack all that much in previous years, so I'm not sure if that's the thing that actually happens pretty often, a small overextension by defenders to help someone else to win a duel, but then maybe they're revealing this little hole that if people time it right, they can drop their base. So that was the only thing that I really noticed during the comp. Otherwise, we had a couple games against Catalyst during the comp where I think we actually were beating them. Had a really good start. I would go out and I got my Wolfpack base, I got my other base, and I was going home. We got some more bases, and we were oh, we might actually beat these guys. I've never beaten them. So this was oh my god, we're about to beat them. This is crazy. And it would have been a massive confidence boost for us. We beat the 3-time champs. Here we go. But they were always able to keep their cool. And then just... I was supposed to be talking about things they can improve on. Here I'm talking about things they did well. But they would always keep their cool, and they would just bounce right back at you. And then suddenly, you thought you were in a comfy lead, and you were all right, we're going to win this game. And then suddenly it's oh, they're now a base up. Okay. So yeah, super hard to give him any more criticism other than that one thing I failed to capitalize on.
I think it's a really important point you brought up about them keeping their cool, though, because they're really, really good mates. And one thing about when you're really, really good friends is that you can have tough conversations outside the arena. Like you can confront each other on things that have happened in the game, and all those kinds of things they're more well accepted because you're really good friends. Everybody knows it's not personal. You can kind of just have those conversations and move on. And that's sometimes the most challenging things for new teams when they come together, is that they not know each other very well. So the conversations aren't quite as harsh because everybody's trying to maintain a good sort of energy within the team. So therefore, like, key things aren't spoken. Essentially, things go uncommunicated. So, and one thing that they've always had going for them is, it was something that we always put down to Lakio bringing to the team, was that ability to really calm them down all the time. Like they always, they never got triggered or lost the plot or did anything like that. And now they're a bit older and more mature. They've just sort of taken that to another level. And the last they've won some close nationals. They've won 2 now where it could have gone either way. But is that luck, or is that a result of them being able to maintain their head in the game at the critical time when it's the 12th hour or the 11th hour, whatever you want to call it, and the whips are cracking, and they maintain that same level of calmness, I guess, so they can execute the skills properly. So one of again, that's a strength. I'm supposed to be talking about ways that areas of improvement, but I just wanted to expand on that as one of the key strengths that they've got even stronger at, I think, over the recent years. Have you got anything, Lauren, that you could add in terms of an improvement for Catalyst?
It's kind of a strength still, but interesting you brought up. So Wolfpack / Catalyst have actually won 3 grand finals by less than a base over the 3 games. So less than 3 grand total score, which you said something interesting. It does look like luck, doesn't it? On the surface, it looks like luck, but it's so consistent. I think it's got to be something else. I think it's got to be something so minuscule. It's actually hard to pick. So I think it actually is. It's those 1%ers. It's those tiny little things, and I think you see it a lot with Wax and his technical skills. You see it a lot with Lakio and his captaining, and I think it's just in those moments where it's a coin toss, it tends to go their way more. And they say luck is a mixture of preparedness and opportunity. I think they are prepared and they create opportunities, and that's how they get these little things. The one tiny bit of criticism I could probably give, and I wasn't paying enough attention to it at Nationals, but it's something we see at home a lot, is they tend, whenever we have a team training or anything like that, they tend to always lose their first game. And I think it's not a little bit in big days. So I think their first game of the day, they tend to not be as on the ball. They tend to not be as in the game. So if they can find some sort of warm up or brain reset to get into it at the beginning of the day, it might just help with those couple of odd games, because this is something we see at home a little bit. That's pretty much all I've got.
So true. I think, Holmes, you're on the committee, so maybe you could switch the Nats around so we play the grand final first and the round robin last.
Yeah, obviously. That's already on the cards, so it's funny you mention that.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, I'm looking forward to how this is all going to turn out. Well, guys, that's been an amazing wrap-up of the top 8 teams. Thank you so much for joining us, Syrex, on the chat tonight. You've really brought some awesome insights, and we really value what you've brought tonight. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, no worries. It was good to be here.
Wonderful. And to you, Holmes, thank you for your contribution and insights again, and it's been a pleasure doing the series with you, mate. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Until next Nationals, and we'll be back here again, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, train hard, play hard, and keep, stay active. Letting us know what you want to hear from us. If you want us to do any more special videos about any particular topics, we really want to hear from you. So, yeah, thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.